Good morning and welcome to all who have joined us. We'll be getting started in a few minutes. I will ask our Office of Continuing Professional Development to please make Dr. Simpson a panelist. Dr. Simpson Mason, a panelist.
I'm sorry I don't see her in the list.
She's on the panel now, Jennifer. I see her on the screen. Dr. Mason, can you hear us? Are you able to share your video?
I can hear you, and I'm working on, and there's video.
There she is.
Correct.
Good morning and welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute.
Thank you so much. I'll try to work on my lighting.
Okay.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Dr. Prakash.
Likewise, Dr. Mason, we're honored. All right. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of our 6th annual SIU Medicine Women in Medicine and Science Professional Development Conference. So I asked you yesterday as we closed to reflect on a quote by Alexis Herman, the former US Secretary of Labor. And the quote was, "Inclusion and fairness in the workplace is not simply the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do." And so I want to reflect on that a little bit and what we heard yesterday during the conference. McKinsey and Company's 2020 diversity report showed that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than companies in the fourth quartile. And further, top quartile companies in ethnic and cultural diversity consistently outperformed lower quartile companies. And when you translate that to healthcare, a review by Gomez et al. Found a positive association between diversity, quality, and financial performance in healthcare. And further, patient outcomes improved when cared for by diverse teams, and there was a direct correlation between increased diversity and financial performance. And so how are we doing? If you look at a recent report by McKinsey and Company in partnership with leanin.org, while women have made some small gains in leadership, we're still unrecognized in leadership positions. Burnout is on the rise, and women of color have worse experiences at work. And the question remains, How well can you contribute when you don't feel valued, when you don't have a sense of belonging in your workplace? And our speakers yesterday gave us a lot of food for thought on the deep impact of the lack of belonging and loneliness and key steps to take to foster inclusion, from taking a long, hard look at your surroundings and taking steps to change them, to really listening to stories of our international medical graduates and understanding what does it mean to be othered, what does it feel to be othered, and how watching them navigate that with grace and courage. So today we continue this very important discussion with another fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm going to start with our first speaker today, Dr. Bonnie Simpson Mason, who will be discussing the equity imperative for graduate medical education. So a little bit about Dr. Simpson. Dr. Bonnie Simpson Mason's mission is to empower physicians with the requisite information, tools, and resources to become leaders who practice in safe and equitable learning environments and to build fulfilled lives for themselves, their families, and their patients. Dr. Mason joined the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, ACGME, as Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in 2020. During her time there, Dr. Mason primarily led the design, development, and implementation of ACGME's Equity Matters, a 10-year continuous learning and process improvement initiative in DEI and anti-racism that engaged over 1,000 members of the GME community and specialty associations. As of January 2022, Dr. Mason joined the American College of Surgeons as the inaugural Medical Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She is collaborating with ACS stakeholders to assess potential barriers, identify opportunities, and develop innovative strategies to recruit and retain a diverse workforce and membership. As a nationally recognized speaker and champion for recruiting and retaining a diverse physician workforce as students, trainees, faculty, and leaders, Dr. Mason holds adjunct faculty appointments in GME and in orthopedic surgery. She has received several awards from her peers, specialty society and physician associations nationwide, including the AAOS's Diversity Award in 2015. For over 20 years, Dr. Mason has spent over 10,000 hours annually coaching and mentoring physicians. And on a personal note, I have shared this with you, Dr. Mason. I call you my guru. So guru in Hindi means, we think of it as a teacher, but the literal translation is one who dispels the darkness. And I was really struggling with the distinction between equality and equity. And I had the privilege of attending one of your sessions, and you put up a picture that totally dispelled the darkness for me. And there's no looking back. I totally get it now, and I'll never forget that. So you are a gifted educator. You are a phenomenal leader. We are so privileged to have you with us. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Good morning, Dr. Prakash. Thank you so much. Number one, for having me and for now making me well up at the beginning of my talk here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with the Women in Medicine and Science Symposium this year. Our professional development is so important, and it's important for us to hear from one another, come into a space where we see our colleagues and those whom we admire, such as yourself, as well as those who aspire to be where we are, so that we can let you know it's possible, so that we can let you know that everything you're thinking and dreaming of is possible. And we're glad that you're here so that you can start to see and create some action steps for yourself as to how to get there, but also so that you know that you don't have to do this alone, and that actually we don't want you to continue along your path without a robust network of mentors and sponsors and colleagues to support you along the way. So it's my pleasure to be here today, and I will start sharing my slides here. Perfect. So good morning, and thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Prakash. I won't take a full hour today, so hopefully there will be some questions that we may be able to field towards the end of the session. It is really an honor to once again share some of my thoughts on some of the most critical areas in GME that need to be addressed and highlighted as we work to improve and increase our workforce representation with respect to the numbers of women in medicine and science. I've been busy over the last couple of decades, having participated, founded, and essentially served in my mind as a supporter of physicians at all levels, in all specialties from all backgrounds, but also specifically identifying and filling voids in along our pathway to becoming physicians. I'll share a little bit about my story throughout our session today, but it's been really just my honor and my pleasure to be able to support physicians who want to aspire into competitive specialties through interventions once we move into residency and navigating some tough situations. And I'll be speaking about some attrition issues that have been now documented and measured, along with our ability to transition into practice successfully through our contracts and negotiation expertise in building those muscles there. I'm sorry, I have a sick child in the background who's coughing very loudly. So you oblige me with that. Always want to acknowledge, and I'm particularly proud of being a part of the American College of Surgeons. Dr. Patricia L. Turner is our executive director and CEO. She is the first woman and the first African American person to hold that illustrious title, heading up an organization of over 80,000 surgeons and over 450 staffers. I came on board at ACS about 15 months ago, so it's really a privilege to watch her lead. And I would implore each one of you to find people to watch what they do, women to watch in leadership as colleagues, and glean from their experience and ask a ton of questions. I'd also like to thank our SIU Dream Team, Dr. Prakash, Dr. Elamine, and Dr. Saraf, all of whom are colleagues that I lean on arduously, frequently, and they're stuck with me forever as we do this work, because I don't, I need support, I garner support, I build support through community development and enhancement over time. And I have found that that has just been the saving grace in building a body of science and DEI that is not always welcome, it's not always easy, and we don't really have the full process of DEI in place yet. We don't have the science fully built out, just as we didn't always understand the science between quality and safety efforts. I believe that DEI can and will follow the same path in terms of its evolution of being established as a true science. But along the way, as you're building, you need co-builders and people who you can lean on and who can also put a brick down next to you or in other parts of the country as you do your work. And then finally, I dedicate my work to my mother, who's pictured here. This is a photo of her from the 1970s when she served as a construction engineer at MARTA, which is the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. She was the on-the-ground supervisor in an all-male field of construction in the 70s, immediately in the post-civil rights era. You can see her here in the picture with her hard hat in the background. And I asked her maybe just 3 or 4 years ago, Mom, who were the other women construction engineers at MARTA at the time? And she said, well, there was, And then I said, so Mom, that means you were the first? And she said, yes. And she had not recognized that she was a pioneer in and of herself back in the 70s. And I watched her day after day get up, go to work, had her had her work boots and hard hat in her trunk. And as she, went to work, I had no idea what she was facing. But as I sought to aspire to be an orthopedic surgeon, and it's still a field that is predominated by men disproportionately, we're the least gender diverse field in medicine still. I thought about her and I said, if she can do it, I can do it. But I leaned on her heavily for her influence and her expertise and advice. So I would implore you to do the same as you move through. Along that path, I sought out orthopedic surgeons, and there weren't very many that looked like me. But fortunately, because I began shadowing a community orthopedic surgeon in Atlanta at Morehouse School of Medicine, where I was matriculating for med school, and we did not and still don't have a department of orthopedics. I would shadow community surgeons, and one in particular, after continuing to show up, he said, well, I guess you're serious because you're still spending your free time here with me in the office. So let me introduce you to my classmate. And his classmate was Dr. Claudia Thomas, whom you see here. And she was the first African-American woman to become board certified in orthopedics in 1980. And I had the privilege of reaching out to her. And this is me in the top picture as a fourth-year medical student after having flown to Baltimore. She was an attending at Johns Hopkins to shadow her in clinic. She was able to write me a glowing letter of recommendation, and actually introduce me to my future chair at Howard University, Howard University's Department of Orthopedics. And not only that, she became my mentor then. And here in the bottom picture, she became my sponsor. And this was us almost 20 plus years later after I had won the Diversity Award from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery, which is one of its highest awards. And again, following in her footsteps, because just 3 years before she had won the same award and had written me a letter of recommendation. So I say that to say, you will have to seek out mentors. The onus is on you. But when you do so and you engage genuinely, frequently, and keep your mentors up to date, up to speed on your progress, ask for help, implement some of the growth solutions that they give you that you can and will meet with success. And I'm happy to say that Dr. Thomas serves as a mentor to me still today. And I pray for her. She's been a little bit ill, but behind her has been just an influx of women into the field of orthopedics, and especially women of color. So I thank her for her leadership, guidance, and mentorship. One of the things that's interesting, and because I was told that I would never be an orthopedic surgeon, though I was always a physical science based scholar. I was a chemistry major in college and took, calculus 1, 2, and 3, differential equations, quantum mechanics, physics. My dad was a radiation physicist. My mom was a construction engineer. I just couldn't imagine when someone told me, because I did not fit the body habitus of an orthopedic surgeon, that I would never be successful. So certainly you understand that that's the best thing you can do, is tell me what I'm not going to do so I can prove you wrong. So in fact, having matriculated into orthopedics against several odds, early on in my residency, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. It was actually late in my residency. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I could only operate as an attending for about 3 years. And then I saw patients non-operatively for 2 years. It became apparent that I was going to have to transition out of clinical medicine. And I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And because that path then was not clear, I wasn't necessarily sure. One thing I knew was that I wanted to encourage other people who look like me, from backgrounds who are diverse, from every background, as a matter of fact, who were also told no, that if you wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon, you could. So one of the things I poured my heart and soul into was building a nonprofit, founding and building the nonprofit Interventions, which is now in its 18th year of helping people like this match into orthopedic surgery, radiology, physical therapy, and other competitive fields, dermatology, against the odds. This has been part of my life's work and my career's passion. Seeing our young people move from here, where this is a class of first-year medical students who are starting their summer internships with InthDimensions, many of whom are now third and fourth year residents. So this was several years ago before COVID, but just to see everyone matriculate successfully into their various fields of choice, once again, has been my life's purpose and work. And this was actually a class of our students that matched back in 2019, once again, from all backgrounds. So one of the things that working in InthDimensions has taught me is that, and this is for you who may have been told what you can't do. With the right information, tools, resources, and network, you can be successful. All of these young people, none of whom were anything less than excellent, were told what they needed to do, accepted the mentorship and coaching, stepped up, did what they needed to do, and they matched successfully in orthopedics this particular year in 2019, and every year before and since. But it is because they stuck together, they worked together, but they also were coachable, they were open to growth, and they put in the time and the hard work. So you can be successful in your chosen field, for sure. So today, I'll just clarify my interpretation of the integral relationship of DE&I. We'll talk about some of the issues around attrition, particularly in surgery, that we're looking to tackle, because if we can address these issues in surgery where retention is the most challenging for women and those from underrepresented and medicine backgrounds, then we can make some inroads in other specialties and in other areas of science as well. So one of the key elements of this work is understanding the relationship between diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many of the efforts in maybe, I would say, the first 20 years, maybe starting in 2000 or so, that started to recognize that we needed to increase the diversity of our workforce for some of the data-driven reasons that Dr. Prakash shared with us from other industries. We recognized that we needed to adopt some of these operational best practices with regards to our healthcare workforce and talent pool. We needed to apply that here in medicine and science. So one of the things we did overall was what we really started pushing an increase in representation. But what we did not do was understand, and maybe it was because we didn't have yet the understanding, but we didn't yet understand that we needed to lay a sound foundation for diverse colleagues to come into environments that were not used to having diverse colleagues. So one of my critical thoughts that I share with my leaders is, if you're going to do something different, you must prepare differently. And we did not think about that, diversifying our workforce in terms of necessarily what preparation needed to happen. And what we found was that we did not necessarily meet with as much success as was hoped. And it's because of this relationship that I'd like to share with you on this slide. And it's the continuum, where I believe that we need to start with implementing equitable practices that will therefore create the inclusive environments and cultures that will thereby be a safe place for everyone in the workforce, but particularly for those from diverse backgrounds. It will be a safe place for them to land. So these equity practices, and those of you from SIU know Dr. Saraf's work very, very well in terms of creating trauma-informed and trauma-aware educational and clinical environments. So implementing practices that lead to these trauma-aware, trauma-informed spaces allows Dr. Elamine to build an inclusive environment and culture with the support of Dr. Prakash, as we bring in more women into our environment, now our environment becomes more inclusive. And for those diverse, students, residents, and faculty members who come into this environment, the work has already proceeded, right? The strategic preparation of our culture has already preceded their arrival, and thereby these everyone in the workforce can show up most authentically and perform the job that they are there to do most effectively, which is that of the delivery of effective and quality patient care. So that's how this works, and it really opened my mind to Dr. Prakash when I heard Dr. Kamara Jones deliver her definition of equity, because this solidified all of these concepts for me in a way that said, this is in fact the rising tide that lifts all boats. We all can agree on this premise that if equity is the assurance of the conditions of an optimized educational and clinical environment, right, the workplace, for everyone within the workforce to the benefit of our patients, right? So if we optimize our environment, we take the steps to implement the equity practices that lead to our inclusive environment, then everyone within that workforce benefits. That means they can all show up and do what they need to do operating at the highest of their license. But Dr. Jones also says that we have to satisfy these three requirements if we're going to build and realize this optimal clinical and educational environment. Number one, we have to value all individuals, voices, persons, and populations equally, right? So we're defining equity, but we're saying we have to value all persons and voices equally, right? So there has to be bi-directional, multi-directional conversation, communication, and input so that we can understand the needs of others through their lens, not just what we come in and say someone needs. That's my underlying, I'll just say, disagreement with the term cultural competency. It presumes that I, as a Black woman, could understand the lived experience, let's just say, of a white male or an Asian male or woman. Each has their own unique experience, or someone from another religious background. I should not ever say that I'm competent in what it's like to be them, because then that presumes that I have a body of knowledge that really is not informed by experience, so that those who live that experience as the experts are then minimized. So I don't ever want to presuppose that I am competent in what it is like to be you and live your experience. So that's why we have to value all individuals and voices equally and create an opportunity to hear from everyone actively and strategically. We also have to, bullet number 2, recognize and rectify historical and current ongoing injustices in our healthcare system, in our educational path. These exist, and because we've not yet spent a preponderance of time reviewing, recognizing the mistakes that were made, why certain decisions and policies were implemented, it's not until we do that can we address and actually work to mitigate the harm that's been caused by those policies, procedures, and ongoing actions, such that we can reframe, edit, and revise policies to make them more inclusive. And then also, too, we have to be willing to provide resources according to need without judgment. I say all the time that it's important that we, once again, ask people what they need and not presume that we know what our learners need, our residents need, our faculty needs, because my set of needs would necessarily be different as someone else's based on our lived experience. But a one-size-fits-all approach to education, training, clinical adeptness, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, which is why we end up finding that we have some trainees and students and faculty, for that matter, that have different experiences and are less successful in our environments, because we as leaders who have opportunity to influence our environments have not taken the time to see what we need to build into the environment to make sure that our environment is as resourced and as supportive for everyone everyone that we're inviting into our environment. So here's the graphic that Dr. Prakash referred to that I use in every talk, just so we're clear. So this provides a graphic differentiation between what's equal and what's equitable. Here we have 3 plants on the left, a cactus, a flower, and a fern. And we see that they are all receiving equal amounts of light and hydration. So for people who say, equality is the goal, this is in fact the differentiator that we want to explore today. So with everyone receiving the same amounts of light and hydration here on the left, we see that the plants are alive, but they're not necessarily thriving. The cactus has a dead spot. The rose, the red of the rose is a little less vibrant, and the green, and the ferns, green is not greening. But if we look here on the right, we see that we have 3 plants that are proliferating. They are thriving. They are performing the job that they are there to do with excellence. Why? Because the cactus is receiving resources according to its needs. More light, maximum light, low hydration. The rose or tulip is receiving medium light, medium hydration, and the fern is receiving low light and more hydration, maximum hydration. Now, are we going to be angry with the cactus for requiring what it requires, which is more light? Are we going to charge it more and make it pay more of the light bill because it requires more light? Similarly with the fern isn't necessarily driving up the water bill, but are we going to cast judgment on the fern for needing what it needs in order to thrive, live? And now it's doing what it needs to do, which is grow beautifully, fervently, and with fervor, making us happy. But we want to judge sometimes people for having different needs, although they are there to do the job that they've been called to do. So that's our premise in providing resources according to need, that now we have this culture that is supportive, that's inclusive, that it benefits everyone in the workforce because everyone's needs have been identified and resources have been allocated accordingly. This increases access to knowledge, to exposure in the operating room, to procedures. It increases access to quality patient care for our patients because everyone feels as they have a genuine sense of belonging in this space to show up authentically as they are, which means they can not be stressed about someone addressing them inappropriately, about someone casting racial aspersions. Because I don't have those sets of distractions, now I can perform maximally because I can focus, being myself, being on task without the distractions that many of our isms bring to bear in the workplace. So it is with that continuum that we want to, and I spend some time on that because unless you can articulate this relationship for yourself, it is hard to go back to our environments and convince those in power to make the requisite changes that will lead to actually the environment that benefits everyone indeed. And moreover, at the college, our priority, our highest goal and mission is to achieve surgical excellence. And it is through the explanation of creating these surgical environments that are implementing equitable practices that will allow us to create surgical environments that are more inclusive, supportive, and welcoming to those from diverse backgrounds, including women, especially women. It is important for everyone doing work in equity to know that what we're asking people to do does not undermine excellence. It only supports and is necessary for us to achieve excellence. But we have, and you'll hear the narrative that excellence is undermined by diversity. And I have yet to see that data. I have yet to see that data. that supports that work. And it really emanates from the narrative that everyone was not equal to begin with, which is a historically racist narrative that identified Blacks who were freed slaves as 3/5 of a human. That you've seen all of the work that's been put into place to actually de-racialize many of the tools and ratios and calculations that have been used to determine healthcare and care distribution. All of that hinges from the just the historical narratives that were based from those racist tropes. So please understand, excellence, to achieve excellence, we must have representation, we must have inclusion, we must have diversity. That is the only way we will achieve surgical excellence. You can see I get a little charged up about this, so please bear with me. Well, there's a reason why too. Here is some AAMC data, I believe from 2019, 2020. And I know the writing is small, but what I'd like you to see is that in terms of our representation of women, so these percentages represent the percentage of women in each one of these specialties. And you can see that we're doing very well, especially with the percentage of women in our medical schools increasing. Our GME representation of women is also increasing. And one of the things that I show my surgical colleagues is that our surgery representation of women all falls below this red line. The highest being in plastic surgery and then general surgery residencies as well at 45%. But guess what? That is outstanding. And I will tell you that coming from the field of orthopedics, which is way down here at the very bottom, and that number of 18.3% of women representation in orthopedics is 3 times higher than it was when I was in residency. So we are improving, don't get me wrong, but we have a long way to go to meet our surgeon colleagues at 45% of representation. And I will tell you, the culture in the general surgery spaces that I've had the privilege to visit and speak in has been extremely welcoming. I mean, it's been a surprise, and it's been a welcome surprise. And I think that's because of the women in these spaces who have understood that we have to make some cultural shifts if we're going to invite in, recruit, and retain women in our surgical fields. And once again, the specialties above the line have greater representation of women and certainly likely have cultures that are more conducive and supportive of women. So with that, I'm really encouraged about the work that's being done. But there's a corollary to this. Dr. Haruno and colleagues have recently published this study, which examines some issues that we're having with retaining residents. This study looked at an 18-year demographic representation of residents across all surgical specialties over this 18-year period. And what they were examining was, who's retained and who is not in residency programs in surgery. They examined all attrition, attrition that was unintended, withdrawals, transfers, and dismissals, but this did not include those who chose to change careers into another specialty. And unfortunately, what they found was that there was a greater percentage or likelihood of unintended attrition in surgery across all specialties for women and for those who were underrepresented in medicine by race and ethnicity. And unfortunately, this attrition rate was greatest if you are African American in almost every specialty. So we have to look at where we have some culture, like some culture / environmental challenges that are allowing residents who may comprise likely 1% I should say a single digit percentage representation of diversity within their subspecialty, but are overrepresented in those who are dismissed, who find themselves dismissed from programs. And the same for women, which means that we need to go back and think about what we're doing. But after we invite someone in, what are we doing to necessarily make sure that they are retained and supported in this field? You can just take a quick look at this study, and what they found was that the unintended attrition rate across all specialties was 6.9%, but the unintended attrition rate was 2.3%, highest in neurosurgery. In the middle column here, you see that the unintended attrition was 2 times higher across all specialties, but 7 times higher if you were Black or African American in orthopedics. And look at our numbers for women, that it was 17% higher for women across all of our surgical specialties versus that of white men, but it was 2 times higher in orthopedic surgery if you're a woman. So we have challenges with retention. And I think it comes down to us having a culture challenge. I said this in one of my recent talks, and it's backed by this data as well. Dr. Yuron Hu and Dr. Villamoria have performed the first, second, and now are into the third trial surveys of surgical residents across all general surgery programs. And in the first trial, our residents told us, and I know that we've been talking about burnout in this symposium as well, but our residents told us that the single greatest contributor to burnout in residency was the exposure to workplace mistreatment. And in the second trial, our residents who reported themselves to sit at the intersection of race and gender diversity, 70% reported mistreatment. So if the mistreatment sits at 70% for those who identify as women and as women of color, and it has been indicated, and the residents are telling us that this is the single contributor, single greatest driver to surgical burnout in these environments. How do you think we're going to perform? Are we going to be performing maximally? From an educational perspective, academic, retention, contributions, asking good questions if we've been mistreated. And if we are stressed by even aggressions, I don't call them microaggressions, I call them aggressions, discrimination, harassment, are we going to be able to think clearly about the next treatment decision we need to make, the next surgical step? If this, in fact, is contributing to our lack of well-being in these spaces, are we going to be able to show up fully to deliver that quality patient care that we have sought, which was our goal to show up and deliver? We won't be able to do that if we don't have the support of those who don't look like us, who say that this culture has to change in order to support people who do. In my heart of hearts, I am convinced that we can be tough without being toxic. We can be tough. Medicine is tough. We are managing, supporting, and making care decisions about life. And we know that. And those are tough decisions, and we do have to be tough, but we don't have to be toxic. When addressing these issues, how do we start to make change? One of the things that I've found, and I'll start to wrap up here quickly, is that there has to be some accountability in this space, and the accountability has to start at the top with leadership, people who have the power, the authority, and the access to resources and the authority to allocate those resources accordingly in order to shift the culture in our organizations, our institutions, in our medical education environments. What we found is that the people who usually do the preponderance of this work are usually under-resourced, may or may not be supported by leadership, which is why in our Equity Matters collaboratives, we made sure that we had the full representation of our C-suiters, our leaders in GME, and our faculty leads in those spaces so that they could work together to create some strategies around culture shift and change in our systems and learning environments. Not only that, we want to make sure that everyone in the workforce knows that equity work is each of our responsibilities, and that if you're in an environment and you see someone being mistreated, it is your job to speak up, be of support to that person, but also to report, because that toxicity is not just affecting those people that may be involved. You are receiving this vicarious trauma, as I've learned from Dr. Saraf. It's like secondhand smoke. So you are also being affected. And then once again, we've just learned from our residents that that is contributing to burnout, which means this is also something that can be addressed and be preventable. And who is the ultimate group of stakeholders that is affected by what decisions we decide to make in terms of being accountable for equity or not? It's our patients, and it's the individuals in our workforce. So we want to be clear that this affects everyone, and the work to achieve this equitable work environment that is inclusive and one that begets belonging will benefit us all. Just going back to our microbiology days quickly, we know that one of the key labs was pouring our culture, and then also to pipetting our microorganisms onto the culture to see what we were measuring, proliferation or non-proliferation. Well, we know that in these environments, and I liken this to our medical education environments and our clinical environments, what determined whether the microorganism was going to proliferate or not? So that's a question, but not a trick question. What determined whether that organism was going to proliferate or not? That's right, the culture. What was in the culture, right? So it's up to us to build a culture, pour into a culture, those components that will lead to proliferation of our students, our residents, and our faculty to the benefit of our patients. Because I don't think that we have to be VRE or MRSA just to get through residency. We shouldn't have to be. That is making, placing the onus on us alone to matriculate successfully. And I think that our leaders absolutely have to take ownership and be held accountable in this space in order to build these cultures that are more inclusive. Thank you for the hearts. A he for she moment that I'd like to share with you. Here I am as a chief resident in orthopedics at Howard University. So you can see that my matriculation through residency was basically, a test of, gender representation with only one other woman in this photo. And there was either only myself or one other woman in my residency throughout my training. This is before work duty hour restrictions went into place. But one example that I like to share is that from my chair, Dr. Richard Grant, who was absolutely and still is a he for she proponent, sponsor, and mentor of mine. And he would pour everyone into the same room on our first day of residency, the faculty, the residents, the students, and he would proclaim broadly and unequivocally that we have women in this program, and we always will have women in this program. We respect the women in this program, so there will be no sexual harassment of the women in this program. And if you want to sexually harass someone, you have to come and sexually harass me first. Instant psychological safety was imbued and infused into our clinical and learning environment. And I have to say that I felt so psychologically safe from that perspective. I mean, they were still knuckleheads with me, a woman, pledging a fraternity. So there was still that aspect of, fraternizing that I had to learn to manage. but the sexual harassment piece was off the table. And that's how leaders, when we set a culture and a tone, that's how we can do so effectively and definitively moving forward. I will always appreciate him for that. And I remember that to this day, and thank him for it. So just as I close, we know that there are some additional risk factors that we know contribute to attrition from a program's perspective. When we take a one size fits all approach, when we have transition of our program directors, if there is isolation that is not addressed, you see a resident that is not engaged, as a leader, it's our job to go and engage that resident. I won't read through all of these because it's a lot, and this is the basis of some of the data that we're collecting from the National Council for Residents, a group of physicians that has come together to really support residents who have been put on probation and are in danger of dismissal from programs. But one of the things that I'd like to share with everyone is that we know that our culture needs to be addressed, and the isolation that we find many residents end up withdrawing into when they start to experience some challenges is one of the key elements that we can address. So we want to avoid isolation, isolation is like kryptonite. We want to make sure we keep our residents engaged, especially if they're the first, the only, or different. We know that resident performance is going to be variable post-COVID due to just a lack of patient exposure and experience over time. And then one of the things that we want to make sure that we do, I talked to a resident who's in trouble about 1 a.m. 2 nights ago, and I asked that person about their academic reading curriculum. And as a third-year resident, they weren't sure what to read. They had been told to just go read. We have to be specific, not presume that our residents know. And that that's an example of providing the resources, the academic resources that the residents know they need to digest in order to be successful. And as leaders, we need to address openly and with frequent communication, consistent messaging around our inclusive environment, our zero tolerance for mistreatment and harassment, making sure that we have readiness, preparation, and transition plans in place. And if we need to, we can call a consult. And as residents and learners, we need you to communicate with us if you are experiencing any trouble or challenges. We want you to be responsive and coachable. Own your deficiencies, because we want to see how you respond to an identified area in need of improvement. And know that you are responsible for your academic and clinical progress, as I continue to hammer down on the leadership about their responsibility to you to create an environment for you to thrive. And so with that, I will wrap up. I apologize if I've gone over, but as you can see, I get a little bit excited about the work and establishing a core foundation of understanding for how and why we can move this work forward together. So Dr. Prakash and team, thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Mason, thank you for a truly, truly phenomenal session. I have taken so many notes. As you've spoken, I've been, busily writing away. I do invite our audience to use the chat to share comments or questions for Dr. Mason. So, something that really touched me, Dr. Mason, was, beginning this talk with a nod to your mom, a shout out to your mom. I was so touched by that because my mother plays an important role in my life and was a source of inspiration for me. So I'm curious, I hope your kiddo gets better, the one who is coughing in the background, but I wonder, your children, when they see you, what is their perspective and what are your hopes, for when they see you?
Oh boy, that's a load. Thank you, Dr. Prakash, for that loaded question. So I'll have to ask them. I'll ask them that question. What do they think when they see mom? They know mom is very busy. They know mom has been called to do some very important work. I don't think I share with them specifically or as much or as often the details of what I do. And I was just thinking about that I should do that a little bit more. We happen to attend schools that um, embrace and engage uh, our elementary, middle, and high school students around elements of DEI. So they're getting some exposure. Um, but I think I could tie it together better for them so they would have a better understanding um, of the work I do in building these solutions. They do hear the distress in my voice when I'm counseling and mentoring students and residents, even faculty who are in distress. And they make space for me to do that. So I'm very appreciative um, to them for that. But they also know that I'll do anything and everything I can to continue to be there to be supportive of them. And so they see the effort, and I hope they digest and understand the amount of effort that and intensity, which may be a little too much sometimes, um, in being their mom as much as I do my work. So just prior to this talk, my son um, uh, was able to play, he had a scene in Shakespeare, and they were on stage right at 8:30 before the 9:30 talk. And I was happy I could be there, because that is important. I shared with another young mom last week, the mommy guilt doesn't go away. So stop trying to make it go away. It's something we can manage. We have to manage that together, talk about it, process it. I have a therapist who helps. Um, Proudly so, because that's time for me where I can process this. And I do share that with my boys too. This a lot. This is an emotional drain, and it's hard sometimes doing this work, which is why working with you, Dr. Prakash, and Dr. Elamine, Dr. Saraf is so key to have others in this space to support us. So they love their high octane mommy. And I call them my bear cubs. They were born in Chicago. So these are my Chicago bears along with my husband. So
I love it. I love that, Dr. Mason. And what I especially appreciate about what you said is your honesty with them, and not being afraid to be vulnerable and keeping your authentic self at home, right? In the home space, how important that is, especially when it comes to the people in that personal sphere around you, that you're impacting. That it's just so important. And so thank you for that. There is a question in the chat from Dr. Elamine. You talk about the importance of feedback. How do you mentor people to receive feedback openly?
um, that can be tough. Thank you for that question, Dr. Elamine. When it comes to, I think generationally, we're seeing some differences in how people receive feedback. Um, in our now digital world, where many of our students and residents have had less community engagement, certainly COVID did not help our ability to stay to maintain intrapersonal contact, person to person, in person. What we're finding is that we have really a lot of students who may not have had as much coaching and mentoring as we had growing up when everything was community. There were very few digital connections, so everything was in person. And so I think we get to share that difference with our younger people to encourage them. I encourage my sons who maintain most of their contacts digitally, that we still have to meet in person. And in that interpersonal contact, I hope as a mentor to be able to share some things with you based on my experience, based on my mistakes, that I'd like you to take to heart. And though you may not have had a plethora of opportunities to receive this additional input from outside influences who weren't your family or weren't your immediate colleagues, just know that there's valuable information and benefits to being open to being coached, to taking a step that may sound uncertain to you, but you have to trust at some point it's coming from someone who has your best interest at heart. And that is a big step that you have to make a conscious decision to make. And many times it's frustrating as mentors when we see students or residents not take the steps that we've advised them to take. But at some point, young people, please take into account that, you know what, this person has a track record of supporting me. Maybe I'll try to be more open to taking their advice, acting on it, because just maybe their experience might benefit me in the future. I've always found that to be the case, and I still follow my mentor's advice to this day.
I, I think that's powerful. And I couldn't agree more. You know, something else that you said about mentorship that resonated with me was that the onus is on you as the mentee, that the onus is not on the prospective mentor. It's not their responsibility to continue to reach out to you. You need to be driving that relationship.
Yes.
That's on you. And I've seen stuff about this published, Dr. Basin, about how the most successful mentorship relationships are driven by the mentee. You know, can you talk a little bit? You talked about how Dr. Claudia Thomas was your mentor and your sponsor. Can you share the distinction between how she mentored you versus how she sponsored you?
So we were just talking about this in another meeting. You can have one person who may be in a position to do both, or you may have colleagues who may be one or the other. So your job as a young person aspiring to meet your goals is to build as many relationships as possible with mentors, who are those people who help you take one step after another towards your path. They're guides. Okay, so they're guides. And then it's up to you to take those requisite steps, write the papers, follow up with them, keep them abreast of your progress. That advice is very important. And most of the time that's based on their experience, right? So there's somewhere where you would like to go. So good point, Dr. Prakash. I have mentors in orthopedic surgery, but I also have mentors in business. I have mentors now because I sit in the C-suite of a major organization. I have C-suite mentors. They're not the same people. So I have different groups. I have mom mentors, right? And friends, right? And so there are different groups of mentors for different purposes. And these, again, are people who are helping you take step by step along your path to reach your goal. A sponsor is someone who knows you well enough that they're willing to put their reputation on the line to recommend you for an elevated position, more exposure, a speaking engagement, a promotion, something where they can say, when they're sitting around the table in a room, once again, that you may or may not be in, I think we should invite Dr. Prakash to be part of this board of directors. I'm willing to, you will not go wrong with her. I've worked with her for X number of years. Dr. Prakash needs to be here. And they're willing to put their reputation, leverage their credibility on your behalf. That means someone has to know you well enough to go beyond a letter of recommendation to say, I am willing to expend some of my professional credibility on your behalf. And that comes after you've known people for a while, after you've proven who you are, your work ethic, your level of excellence. They've seen it and they're willing to back you for promotion in a space where you may not even have the opportunity or know that they're promoting you into. So you want to have mentors and sponsors. And Dr. Thomas sponsored me for that diversity award. And she told me later that she let the committee have it because they had not given the award to anyone at that point who was right around, who was under 50. They had given the award to all of the old gray-haired people. And she said, are we going to continue to honor the people who are close or into retirement, or are we going to bring the next generation along? And so she sponsored me in that way.
I think that's so powerful, and it's such an important point, Dr. Mason, especially in academic medicine. where, you know, when you go from associate professor to professor, in most organizations, you need national presence, and that requires someone in a position of power making sure, you know, that you have a seat at the table. So thank you. I, I, I think that's so important. You know, Dr. Sharkey, I know we're running a little over time, but I do want to make space for this question. Dr. Sharkey wrote, I loved your story about your department leader stipulating no sexual harassment so directly. Obviously an amazing he for she, but there's also still a boys club that's worse in some specialties than others. Can you share how you keep your relationships and affiliations without tolerating the quote boys club banter that isn't sexual harassment, but is still not okay?
Yep, it's still locker room talk, right? We know it's still locker room talk. I encourage my boys to, even though they hear it now, you know, they've heard it for years already, that we have to be respectful. But we also know that that culture is bigger than us. So I had to make a conscious decision because I did need to be a part of that community in order to also reap the benefits of, you know, of the promotion, of the additional information being shared in the men's locker room while I was in the women's locker room. I had to build enough relationships that they would come out and tell me what was just discussed in the men's locker room. So I did have to have a level of tolerance. I was not supporting it, but it was a level of tolerance, but I knew what my threshold was. And so if I walk into a room and the guys are in there cutting up, and it's going to happen, right? If the guys are in there just guys being guys, unfortunately, if it went too far, I would ball up a piece of paper and I'd throw it across the room like a flag on the play. They know what that means because they know when that yellow flag comes across the football field, they know that's a foul. And they're like, okay, Dr. Mace, okay. I was Dr. Simpson at the time. Okay, we know that was too much, right? So that was my indicator. That was me setting boundaries. I'm here, I'm different, and you're going to respect the boundaries I set. And I'm not going to throw a flag every day at every snide comment. But number one, I am going to set a boundary when it goes too far. But number two, I had colleagues that would set boundaries on my behalf too. So then that also became the running support. And one of my best friends is still one of my best friends to this day, Dr. Ronald Baker, because he would also set boundaries for me with the guys in spaces. And then it started to have like a ripple effect. Like there was just a little bit less as time went on. And if they did it, they absolutely did not do it in my presence. And then there were sometimes I would just opt out of the social environments. Like I don't have to go to everything. You all just go do you, and I'll be fine over here because I'm still very girly in how I presented, which was my choice, right? I still wanted to be a woman in orthopedics because that's how I identified. But I also knew I was going to need to set those boundaries. My mom helped me with that as well, being in construction.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason. There's just one more thing, and I promise, I know we're running over time. This has just been so engaging. I do want to ask one more question that I thought was so important. So first of all, I loved your continuum, right? Of everything melds into one another. You create the right culture, you get the right people in terms of the diverse workforce, and that builds on equitable practices and so on and so forth. So I love that continuum. And then, you know, you're talking about recognizing historical and current injustices. So how does that translate to healthcare? So when we look at our Black and African American population, for instance, recognizing things like Tuskegee, Dr. Marion Sims, you know, the list sort of goes on and on and on. How do we recognize those and the current injustices, right? You know, with systemic racism, how do we recognize those to build trust so that we can provide the best care possible?
I have decided, so it's just my decision, that the way we address these issues moving forward is through education and communication. Create opportunities for everyone in our spaces to learn about what has transpired, the current evidence that shows the perpetuation of ongoing inequities in any number of populations, demographics, and even regions. We have to understand what has resulted by the efforts that have taken place so far in medicine to date, so that we can then communicate and build solutions to address the historical and the current injustices and talk about it in community, build, problem solve, and collaborate in creating these solutions that we hope will be sustainable and scalable across healthcare. So this is a big lift. But if you ask me where to start, it starts with us becoming educated on the basic sciences and the historical aspect and evolution of the disparities and inequities that we're existing is at the core of the fundamentals of DEI. That's why Inequity Matters. That's one of the first chapters we start out with. Like, we can't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. So we have to make sure that we understand the historical interactions with all groups in medicine. But we know, and so without that understanding, then we can't build into the equation for people who aren't from a minoritized background, why it's important for them to be involved too. How and why they can be part of the solution, because it affects all of us. And so when you understand the depth and scope of the problem from its origin, then you can start to identify and be humanized in this situation, to say, I can be part of the solution as well. And so that's what we ask of everyone in the space. What can we each do to help decrease our inequities, but also to increase the feeling of inclusion in this space? One last story, I had a chief resident who was, when I was at UCLA in general surgery, I had a patient who refused to see me because I was Black. I went out to my team and I said, chief resident, and I don't even remember his name, but he was the urology chief resident. And I told him what happened. Tall Jewish chief resident. He walks into the room and he says, ma'am, Dr. Simpson is part of our excellent surgical team. She is your intern. She's here to take great care of you. And if you don't want care from our team, which includes Dr. Simpson, you can seek your health care somewhere else. Right? That was someone else. I didn't ask him to do it. I just told him what happened. That was his instantaneous response. That's how we mitigate this. This is how we stand up for one another. Once again, I felt validated. I felt like I belonged in that space on that team, because this person who we had no shared background in common, except that we were there to perform excellence in surgery, right? He used his voice to advocate for me. That's the choice we get to make every day.
Yeah. And if that could just be embedded in our culture, how great could we be?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason. This has been so powerful. And I'm taking, you can be tough without being toxic with me. We need to embed that into our culture. No need to be VRE or MRSA. That especially struck a chord with me as an infectious diseases.
How about that?
Listener. Yes, yes. So I cannot thank you so much for an enlightening hour, little over an hour. I took a little bit more of your time because this was just so phenomenal. And so thank you so much for your wisdom, my teacher, my guru, always. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason.
Thank you, everyone. It's been my joy, pleasure, and privilege. Thank you for having me today. And congratulations on another wonderful conference and symposium. Best to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Simpson. Simpson Mason. So next, I am so privileged to have two more exceptional speakers on national and global efforts to foster equity and inclusion. And this is going to be a discussion with my dear colleagues, friends, my peer mentors, my role models, Dr. Catherine Sharkey and Dr. Padmini Murthy. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to both of them. I'm going to start with Dr. Padmini Murthy, who I fondly refer to as Minnie. So Dr. Murthy is a globally recognized health professional and educator in her roles as a physician and public health expert. She has practiced medicine and public health in various countries for 30 years. She's professor and global health director at New York Medical College School of Health Sciences and Practice, USA, and immediate past chair of the International Health Section of American Public Health Association and global health lead for the American Medical Women's Association and NGO rep to the United Nations. She is a well-respected NGO leader. And she's currently chair-elect of the Intersectional Council of American Public Health Association. Dr. Murthy has been working with UN ambassadors and missions to promote women's health over the past 20 years. She has led various projects with local efforts in Malawi, India, the list goes on, and has moderated high-level panels at the UN, nationally and internationally. She spearheaded efforts working with other NGOs during the COVID crisis to provide relief to India, Italy, and the Navajo Nation, and has given over 200 presentations nationally and internationally. Just a few of her many accolades are, in 2021, she was the recipient of the President of the United States Lifetime Achievement Award for volunteer service, and in 22, a top global advocate for 2022 by the International Association of Top Professionals. Dr. Murthy, welcome. And Dr. Katie Sharkey is a sleep medicine physician and associate professor of medicine and of psychiatry and human behavior and associate dean for gender equity at the Alpert Medical School of Brown University. In 2023, she was named Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Multi-Specialty Practice Plan, Brown Physicians Incorporated. She earned her MD PhD and completed a combined medicine and psychiatry residency at Rush in Chicago. She joined the Brown faculty in 2007. Dr. Sharkey is a recognized expert on sleep and circadian rhythms, particularly as they relate to mood regulation and women's health. Her current research is supported by a grant from the National Institutes of Mental Health. Dr. Sharkey is an associate editor of Behavioral Sleep Medicine and Frontiers in Sleep and serves on the editorial board of Sleep Health. Dr. Sharkey also serves as the mentorship chair for the American Medical Women's Association and is a member of the WHAM Collaborative, a nonprofit dedicated to accelerating and investing in women's health research. So both of you, that's like quite the list. I'm overwhelmed just listening to both of you. You two are powerhouses. You inspire me. I'm so excited about our discussion today on national and global efforts to foster exactly what we're talking about, equity and inclusion. So let's start with some definitions. How do you define equity and how do you define inclusion? And why are they important at the local, national, and global levels? If you don't mind, for the purposes of the discussion, I'm going to go by first name. So Minnie, let's start with you. What are your definitions of equity and inclusion, and why do we care? Why does it matter?
First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Prakash Vidya. I mean, you're a dear colleague, and it's so nice to share a podium with you, Nancy. I mean, it's so nice. And I think one of the most important things, before I answer your question, Vidya, I would just, respectfully request your 10-second indulgence from all of you present. As women, we need to support each other. So one of the biggest issues I find in equity, now coming on to equity, like working at national, global, local platforms, and I just was in Japan being invited for the C7, which is an official platform of the G7. And also I'm working on the C20, an official platform of the G20, both on the health committees. Well, when you're talking about equity, we make sure everybody is on the same plane and giving somebody else who has a little lesser thing a little more. Like you put a stool for a child who cannot see as well as her or his sibling because she or he is shorter. This is the classic diagram there, infographic, which we explain. But again, equity, I would just like to stress this in my years of working on issues. I think it's so important because we need to understand with equity, the person who is the recipient of equity needs to have responsibility. So I would like to introduce the term equity with responsibility. Yes, we do everything we can as physicians, as women, but at the end of the day, it's just not a one-way stream. They need to understand, they need to work with you. So equity needs to be responsible and sustainable. So it's everybody getting a piece of the pie, but nobody has, like, Vidya, you're Indian American like me. Akshay Patra, what we say in Sanskrit, attendees, is a never ending supply of things. So equity also is not never ending. We need to make it never ending. It needs to have efforts from all of us. So in my definition of equity is to make sure the playing field is as level, as smooth as possible. Again, we have to be practical. It cannot always be smooth, but we try to reach most of the goals of making it at least 90% or 95% smooth. But it needs to be responsible on the person to whom we are including in the equity pool, and also everybody's efforts, all the stakeholders, to make it last and sustainable. So that, in my definition, if somebody asks me, and when I'm talking to my medical students or residents or anybody, this is the thing of equity. Last but not least, it needs to be respectful. So it's not condescending, it needs to be respectful. So this is my definition, Vidya and Nancy, of being equitable. And what was the other part of what you asked me, Vidya?
Yeah, so Minnie, what I asked you and Katie was, how do you define equity and inclusion and why are they important?
Okay, Katie, sorry. So inclusion is important is because nobody likes to be disenfranchised. You don't want to be left out based on your color, your religious orientation, your sexual orientation, or where you live and what your socioeconomic status is. Especially for us as healthcare professionals, it's so important to be inclusive when we talk to our patients or students, and not let anybody feel left out, and not be kind of, what shall I say, be arrogant, if I could use the term, in that, okay, okay, I'm superior to you, but I'm doing you a favor by including you, because nobody does anybody a favor. Inclusion is a win-win process for everybody, both the recipient and the person who is being, who is a proponent of inclusion. So that's one of the things I love about AMBA. We try to include everybody. And that's why we have so much of a strong mentoring program for our young students, where we tell them, hey, it's great what we're doing. We look forward to having you. And the last thing I would like to say before I turn it over to you, in inclusion, you don't have to be threatened. Now, by including Katie, and sorry, Katie, I said Nancy, I was having technical issues, so my apologies. I gave you a new name, but believe me, I respect you as much as you would be Nancy or Katie. So again, what I would like to say is, one of the things we need to be so cognizant about is the theme of inclusion and respect, and not be condescending. And the last thing I just wanted to say before I turned it over to you is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. That's what I have realized is so important, because some of us are more privileged because we are in a position we can make a difference. So whenever I talk to my daughter or any young people, I always tell them, just what is the one wish, if you wanted, if you could wave a magic wand, is to say, make me strong, make me be on a stable ground so that I can reach out to somebody else. So I think this is important. And if you do it without expecting returns, I think it's tremendous, the effort, and it's a win-win. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Minnie. Katie, how about you? How do you define equity and inclusion, and why do they matter? Why is it important?
Sure, I'm happy to add a few things, although I think that Minnie did a great job, and also Dr. Simpson-Mason. And I do also want to say thank you for including me, and I'm honored, really honored to be here. I loved the conference yesterday and appreciated, I appreciate our collaboration from Brown to SIU. So great to be with you all. The things I would add are that haven't, I think, been mentioned yet is how to foster a sense of belonging as part of inclusion. And, that came up a little bit in Dr. Simpson Mason's presentation. I think about how much we depend on and rely on the teams that we have in healthcare, whether that is patient care or teaching or research. We've solved the easy problems that people can do all by themselves. And so for me, part of equity and inclusion is also really honoring the different things that everybody brings to the table. And what a relief that, you're an ID, right? Hail the pharmacist who knows the things, right? How are you going to know, right? Like they do a card every month of what's sensitive now and where we lost sensitivity. And we don't have time to do all of it. The research study that I run has, I have an RN and a research assistant and a research nurse. They could do the whole thing without me, and they come to me for, the financial problems and, an occasional, because they're working at the top of their game. And I think, so to me, that's a big equity thing is, medicine and science has been very hierarchical, and I'm not sure those hierarchies serve us anymore. And so really being cognizant of that. And then the last thing that I'll say, which again, Dr. Simpson Mason touched on, is about psychological safety. But it also how critical mass it matters, right? So it's not, there's this very old cartoon that's got two women at a conference table and the rest are men, and the bubble over the women's heads says, "Thank God, one other woman." And a bubble over the men's head says, "Oh no, they've got us surrounded," right? But two's probably not enough, right? And that when you have members on the team or members that you're working with that are traditionally not brought to the table, just having somebody be a token or be the solo, or good, God forbid they get to check two diversity boxes, right? And then that's a very lonely and, let's face it, precarious situation where people who are there representing really may be in a disadvantaged point because they're, solo in that position. And I think related to that is realizing that there are some spaces that aren't for you, right? So, which I, as somebody who I love a big tent, I love inclusion, but there are things that, I'm thinking about. So certain LGBTQ plus events that I, as a white cis hetero woman, right? Like there are things where I can be an ally or I can be an accomplice, but there are also events or groups or things where I don't need to be, they don't need me in the room, and I need to give people the space to have their shared experience, without me being there, but so they don't have to take care of me, or right? Does it? I think another example is, when my Black and African American colleague, sometimes folks want to be by themselves and they don't need to have to worry about whether there's white fragility in the room for some of the things, events they want to have or conversations they want to have. So making space for that is, all of those things are other things I would mention.
Thank you so much, Minnie and Katie. I've taken so much away from our brief discussion so far. And, Katie, you bring up hierarchy. Minnie, you bring up condescension. Unfortunately, that condescension is sort of embedded into the hierarchy. Medicine has been so hierarchical for so long, and you're absolutely right. Is there really a place for the hierarchy anymore, especially when we're trying to build an inclusive environment? And both of you touch on the spirit of allyship as well. Dr. Simpson Mason talked about her colleague who, very vocally stood up for her. And if that could be the norm, for example, the two women surrounded by men in the conference room, if more of the men could be allies for those women to make them feel included, is that what we're aspiring towards? I certainly believe so. The next question I have is if we can get personal. I'd love to hear from both of you about a personal story that illustrates an opportunity for equity in the workplace or in any professional setting. Katie, why don't we start with you? Can you share a personal story that illustrates this as an opportunity?
Sure. I mean, I don't know how personal this is, but we all do different things in medicine, right? And some of them generate more money than others, right? So I think a thing that I think about a lot right now is because um, people want to make a decent living, and I think that I'm very conscious, and I get asked a lot about salary equity, right? And so I think a lot about what is really valued in our academic medical centers. So mentoring, teaching, some service things that they don't generate dollars, and so then you are maybe told, well, your bottom line doesn't look as good as X, Y, and Z person who is billing more clinical RVUs. So I think that's a place where there's more opportunity to work on equitable, like system-based equitable solutions for how to, if we need to have all of these different things, teaching and mentoring and research and patient care and community engagement, and we value all of those as part of the academic medical enterprise. And there are certain things people like to do, and there are certain things that different people, and of both of all genders, non-binary, male, female, whatever, but there are things that people either have an affinity for, and to sort of the implication that some things are worth less, like I'm over that, whether it's because of those service obligations that maybe fall on women, or that maybe women are better at, and so let them do it, but don't devalue it. It's the same conversation as, not to pick on orthopedic surgery, Dr. Simpson Mason, right? But we're in Rhode Island, we have a crisis in primary care. Doctors can't get doctors. We have a listserv where people are like, I'm moving there. Will anybody be my doctor? And can't find somebody to provide their care. Well, okay, then stop not compensating people for the work they've done, right? Like yeah. So I think that's a place. I'll share another example of something we've done at Brown. Didn't personally affect me in an equitable way, but it's an initiative that we're doing in the practice plan that I work in, Brown Physicians Inc., is modeled on a program at Harvard. We developed this diversity fellowship that is it's 3 years, and it is I think 33,000, 100,000. It's either for 3 years or 4 years, but you get 25,000 or 33,000 forever, how many of the years is. And it's unrestricted funding, and it is for folks from historically excluded backgrounds, who are historically underrepresented in medicine. And you can use it to hire a research assistant, pay your school loans, pay your nanny for good childcare, use it to go to conferences that you might not be able to afford to go to. So really to provide some resources for folks that maybe have not had kind of intergenerational wealth, or that there's a cost to them having come up to the point where they're now faculty here, that we don't know what that cost has been, but they're smart and they know where they can maybe use money to help them make it a little bit more level playing field. So we give a couple of those a year. And yes, I have sat in rooms where the people are like, but what about all the other people who aren't getting resources? Right? Because it's not equal, but this is a small attempt to make things a little more equitable for people who there's unknown, and probably none of our, we're not owed people's trauma necessarily either, but by the time they're a faculty member, if they have good use for that money, that they can use to retain them and to make their job here better and easier, we want to do that.
Yeah.
So I'll
And-
stop there. Those are two thoughts. Valuing everyone's contributions and understanding that to make things equitable, some people may need more, and really having that conversation in your work environments so that people aren't like, oh, they get more.
Yeah, no, and it goes back to what Dr. Simpson Mason highlighted, right? Is the difference between equality and equity, and how we really need to be moving towards equity and inclusion, which includes valuing those on the front line who have been undercompensated for many years. Thank you, Katie. Minnie, how about you? Can you share a personal story that illustrates opportunities for equity in either the workplace or in any professional setting?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie. See, I got your name right because now I'm like de-stressed because I had technical issues, but thank you so much. Vidya, thank you for your question. I think it's really important and I would like to share something. So many light moons ago, when I was writing my first book called Women's Global Health and Human Rights, I reached out to many people, and who were really great contributors. And one of the things that I would like to just say, thank Paul Farmer, because the late Paul Farmer, he and his wife Dee Dee co-wrote a chapter for me with Joya Stapleton. So, and Paul, those of us who are fortunate to know him personally, is such a nice person. Paul, we really miss you. And thank you for your indulgence in my just giving a shout out to Paul. So the reason I did it is to say that women can be chivalrous too. We believe in gender equity. So we gave a shout out to a male colleague who did a lot of work. I did not give a shout out to a female colleague because we all do that all the time, but it's nice to say that we acknowledge you for what you did. So coming back to that, and I was in Ghana, and I remember my daughter had just finished her first year in college. She was going to be a sophomore. We went to Ghana for a medical conference, and I met Dr. Fred Sai, who was a doyen in the field of women's health. He's a Ghanaian-born physician who trained at Harvard and went back to Ghana. So I said, Dr. Sai, I would like you to write a chapter for my book. So he looked at me and he goes like, young woman. I said, I'm not so young. He said, to me, you're young. I said, okay, Dr. Sai. I said, why me? I said, sir, I don't want somebody sitting online who has not experienced what you did to promote gender equity writing a chapter. I want you because you're the real book. So he said, you have me in. So he sent me a chapter. The reason I bring that up is because this is a personal story, in my opinion, because he recognized why I was trying to and recognized that as a man, he has to be a champion because this book was Women's Global Health and Human Rights. Now, again, coming back, I had, I don't know, I hope some of you remember Dr. Alan Rosenfield, the former dean in Columbia. Alan was a trained OB-GYN, and he was the one with this phenomenal article who said, where is the M in MCH? Because he said mothers are missing. Everybody's focusing on children. He already had Lou Gehrig, so I reached out to him. I said, will you please write the introduction for my book? And I'm talking about 2010. So he goes like, okay. I mean, he couldn't talk then, so he would, have somebody type it for him. And he was as alert as he was then. And he said, okay, but why me? I said, Dr. Rosenfield, you have been an inspiration to so many of us because you fought tooth and nail to promote women's health and just said, look beyond that, she's not a childbearing machine. So he wrote the introduction, and I still have that email. And Vidya, I mean, I think I can find it. I would be happy to share it with you. He said this was one of the most meaningful projects he was involved in. And I'm not saying this, everybody, just to blow my horn or something. That's not it. But just to say that he recognized the efforts being put by a woman who was, like a mid-level faculty then. I'm talking about 2010, and this is 2023, 2010. So my experience has been positive, but I will also share a negative experience and what I said. See, this is the problem. I was always outspoken. I think, my mom, I think I got that activist gene from her. So there was somebody at work, not going into names, a while ago when I was working in the private sector who made a derogatory comment saying, "Oh, you're there because you're a woman." So I looked up to him and said, "I don't open my legs for anybody. So I am there because of my work, and you better watch it before you make these kind of comments to anybody, any woman such as myself." He later apologized. I said I could have reported you, but I choose not to. This is what I have realized that if somebody is rude to you, you just affirm, and if they have an attitude, I just tell the other person concerned, and I said let it go, because we don't pick these petty battles. There are so many battles for us to pick for our for our daughters, our sisters, or other young women, or ourselves, to make sure there's inclusion. And to me, it's so sad the ERA was not passed, but we will not give up. We will go on fighting for it. And just as Katie was saying, it's not about the money, because the mentoring we do, nobody pays us. But if somebody else could have a little better opportunity in life because of our work, especially women, I think we should all bond together and do it. And Vidya, again, kudos to you and your team, and everybody for putting together this conference, because I think we need more conferences like this. And I'm sorry I couldn't join yesterday because it's graduation time. It's crazy in medical schools, as you know, absolutely. But the last thing I tell any man, including the person I've been married to for more than 35 years, that in the spelling of a woman is man. So you are included in women. So I rest my case is how we have to turn a negative into a positive. And believe me, it's not been easy. We've all, I'm sure Vidya, Katie, myself, and all the people attending have faced severe challenges. We still do. I had to fight to get tenured. That's a different story for another day. But again, persistent perseverance and sincerity, PPS, will get us there. Thank you.
Powerful. I love that PPS. That's something else that I'm totally going to borrow. If you both will just take a look at the screen, and I invite our participants to take a look at this. So many of you, if you're on Twitter, and I apologize, the left one is blurry, I copied it from Twitter, but this is Stanford Surgery, excitedly sharing with the world their match results. So they write, in case you missed it, meet the newest additions to the Stanford Surgery family. And if you look at this picture, the majority of the Stanford class, actually all of them but one person, consists of women. And the one man is an Asian man. And so this is a counter tweet to this. And we saw a lot of vitriol like this in response to this, where they write, reverse racism, Stanford's 2023 surgical team, 92% women compared to US 50% women, 69% non-white versus US 38% non-white, 0% white men versus US 30% white men. So I'm going to stop sharing. I did want to share this with you and all of our participants. And I want your honest take on this, Minnie and Katie. What are your thoughts about the intensely negative criticism here, specifically when it comes to, quote, reverse racism and even reverse sexism, about a class of majority women surgery residents? What does this highlight for you? Please share your thoughts.
Katie, you want to go first, or like?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go first. I mean, I think this is the response to this is it's not pie, right? That where, if someone else gets a slice, you don't, I think is the first kind of thing that comes to mind. Dr. Simpson Mason talked a little bit about this trope that having diversity decreases quality, which, I've done some work in with my research hat on the science of team science, and a lot of that has been done in healthcare. And so all of the data indicate that a diverse workforce is actually provides better quality care. So, and that people have better outcomes when there's medical outcomes and health outcomes when there's congruence between them with race and gender and between the provider and the patient. There are also multiple studies showing that outcomes are better when a woman is your doctor, but we take longer, so maybe we are billing fewer RVUs. So I think that it is male fragility. I think that it's white fragility. I think we have to call it that. I also worry about the stereotype threat that is inherently a risk when stuff like this comes up, where people start to believe that the only reason that they've been admitted to this is not because they're going to be an amazing surgeon, but because they're there just because of the color of their skin or because of their gender identity. So because that's real, that can cause like more anxiety and more stress when you're in a position where you're treated as if you're just clicking a box and not there for your excellence, even though, like I said, the data all suggest otherwise. And I'll be watching very closely. We're about to have the Supreme Court come, tell us about what they think of these affirmative action cases that are and how are we going to keep doing what we know is the right thing to do, and in medical education, in higher ed and medical education and in workplaces. How are we going to keep, I think we're making strides. It is not the time to turn those strides around. And yet Florida is, passed a bill on Wednesday that said that made it illegal to teach gender and ethnic studies at their universities. So, and we're also going to get new Title IX guidelines. So those are the things. When I see that tweet, I'm like, oh, poor you. I'm sure you're like, what, that it makes me sort of like, you're pathetic and sad about that individual, but also people with those sentiments, they live among us, like they're having influence. So I'll stop there. I don't want to monopolize, but pass to you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Vidya. So the first thing which I did see that on Twitter, and thank you for posting that and asking both of us some really good food to think about. I think, first of all, it's a question of entitlement, because I'm a male. And as Katie said, I belong to a certain gender because I have less melanin compared to you. I deserve that, even though performance-wise, I may be inferior to you. But you know what? You have an XX chromosome. I have an XY chromosome, so I'm superior. But hello, you forget that Y has an arm missing. So the XX has all the arms. So this is what I tell people. If you look at the Y, an arm is missing where X is like this and Y is like this. But it also shows sour grapes. And you know what? Get up. Face up to reality. They got in because they were far superior than you. And again, since when has race been factored in performance? That is the whole point. It's like the mindset. So this is what we need to change. And I hate to say it, even in medicine, we have so much of these subtle micro aggressions based on sex, gender, and race. And you know what? They think we don't catch on to them, but we do. So I think it's terrible the way, and it's a question of, oh, poor you. Are you crying? Do you want crowdfunding to buy Kleenex because you lost out? And most of them are women compared to men. But I think we need to address it professionally and respectfully, not like by mudslinging or name calling, but to say, you know what? Wake up, do a reality check. This is 2023 going on at 24. It's high time. We have to think about this. So definitely, I think it's important that we need to address this in any way. And also, I don't think and then we don't say that OB and GYN are traditionally female professions. You do welcome your male OB-GYN colleagues. So why can't you do the same by welcoming your female surgical colleagues? But because at the end of the day, however hard we are in these so-called male-dominated specialties, they make more to the dollar compared to us. So what are you crying about? Because it's a question of quality, and it's a question of recognizing somebody's expertise, talent, and competence. And that's why they were admitted. It's not because somebody was a legacy donor or something like that. So I think we need to move on, and it just showcases how petty and shallow you are in your thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minnie and Katie. So, I attended a course on promoting racial equity in the workplace, and the professor gave us such a simple illustration, but I think it hits the point well, where you have Tommy and Joan, and over the years, their whole lives, Tommy gets 4 cookies, Joan gets 2. And all of a sudden, you start giving Joan 3 cookies, and Tommy gets 3. And Tommy feels deprived because Tommy's been so used to getting the 4 cookies. All of a sudden, they see it as, Katie, you alluded to this, a zero-sum game, right? That all of a sudden, when the playing field starts getting leveled out, somehow you feel like you're deprived when you don't realize that things have been so uneven so long and you were unfairly given the advantage for so long. So I thought it illustrated that point very well. And that's what I think of when I see that response to a tweet like this. So thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives. Minnie, you've done an astounding amount of work and made tremendous progress in the realm of gender equity and the realm of inclusion at the national and global levels, particularly in women's health and human rights. Can you shed light on this work and a few pearls you gleaned along the way?
Vidya, thank you for your kind saying that, because it's teamwork. I think I was just a facilitator. I mean, nobody can say I've changed the world, because it's like by I mean a rhetoric I mean, none of us singly can change the world or make a difference. One of the things, as I said, I would like to share is, before I just answer your question, you mentioned that the cookie example, that was so good, but I want to say that in reality, when there was the Indo-Pakistan war in the 70s, because of Bangladesh was liberated. The reason I bring this up, in the refugee camps, where they were, the women were given food by the various NGOs, including the Red Cross and other agencies there. I remember so clearly reading in the early 80s when I started medical school, is that in the refugee camp, they found that the boys, if a mother had 2 children, a boy and a girl, the girl was given less food than the boy. The ration was given to the boy because, and when questioned, she said it's because the boy will hold up the name of the family. And to me, that strikes a chord, because you are a woman, you are depriving your own daughter. I mean, they both are your children. Okay, you gave birth to them, and even if you didn't give birth to both of them, they're children. You cannot differentiate, and kind of discriminate. That's the term I would use. Long story short, it's so it's deep rooted. It's the gender norms. It's the societal norms. So what I have learned through my work for almost 3 decades is you need to speak up. You need to speak up. It's not criticizing somebody, but my key line is when I go to other countries, I say, please work with me to work with you, to help you and the people, because you don't go that, oh yeah, I'm coming from the United States, or I have an MD or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I know everything. No. Humility, cultural humility is the one pearl I have learned. It goes a long way, and not to have an attitude, and also be fearless. I mean, there's so many times, especially I remember like when, I was talking about menstrual equity, because that's one of the things I've been working with, on AMBA's behalf. We are just wrapping up a project on menstrual equity with the First Lady of Suriname. We've also partnered for Days for Girls on this. The reason I bring this up, because once when I was talking about this, one of the guys goes like, oh, but it's a woman's issue. So I looked at him and said, you wouldn't be here if your mother didn't have a period, end of period. So he was like, and then he goes, this was in person. He goes, you're right. I said, yes, I know. I said, why are you saying that as somebody in health in this day and age? So, I mean, I guess maybe in my 20s and 30s, I was like, Moshe, now I don't care. I'm not disrespectful, but I have no problem calling a spade if it can make a difference, because we all need to work together. So my mantra is, I mean, another pearl I would like to share before turning it back to you is, talk to men, make them understand. I know they don't understand as much as women do, but as well or as fast, but then you have to repeatedly. And again, it takes a small band of dedicated people. Margaret Mead, that's why we are in. And again, thank you, Vidya. And thank you, Katie. I really enjoyed listening to what you said. And, all the organizers for really organizing this, because this is where we share. But for me, well, my parents call me Padmini, I'm called Minnie, but my middle name is Persistence. Since I was a kid, if I wanted to do something, I don't give it up. I don't give up. And sometimes if somebody is rude to me, I'll tell them politely, you're being rude. If they don't listen, I'll say, okay, you're being rude, forcefully, but to get the message across. So, but one thing is, I don't think we should be ashamed of who we are culturally, and don't try to change yourself, but at the same time stand your ground, because when they listen to you, they understand what you bring to the table. And if something I don't know, I respectfully will say, I don't know, that's not my area of expertise, I defer to you, or I could find out from other colleagues and come back to you. But there's something I know, and especially if it comes to women's health, do not say, oh, you guys are like talking like that because you're PMSing. No, you guys have male menopause. We don't tell our male colleagues you're acting out because you have male menopause. And I know there's snide remarks even from male colleagues in our profession who go like, oh, it's that time of the month. It's like, excuse me, what is that time of the month? So, I mean, there's so much of inequity. And the last thing I want, just talk about period shaming, because I think it's so important. Period shaming is people are made fun of because they get a period. It's a normal phenomenon. Even in the United States, we have so much of menstrual equity. It is so sad. Women and girls don't go to college, school. They don't go to work on those days because they don't have protection. So I think we need to like rethink on how we even lobby our policy makers, is make sanitary products lesser, like repeal the pink tax. We did that in New York. We don't have the pink tax anymore. So the other thing, the last thing I would like to say is practical advocacy. You need to be an advocate, but come up with practical solutions. And you know what? Don't bow down. If you take a stance, you need to make sure that come heaven or hell, if this is going to help other people, you need to pull other people into your fold and say, we can do this together. It's not, I am doing this. My mantra is, I can't do it without you, which is the truth. And it's not a political speech, because I'm not running for any office, because I don't like politicians, because they don't do what they're supposed to do in helping other women improve their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Minnie. Powerful, persistence, thoughtful advocacy, this all really strikes a chord. Thank you so much. Katie, you have been a beacon of light at Brown and in AMWA. Can you talk a little bit more about your work with your Office of Women in Medicine and Science, or OWIMS, and the Well Scholars Program through AMWA and multiple organizations, and what pearls of wisdom you gleaned along the way in your journey?
Sure. Thanks for this question. I appreciate it. And I love thinking of of being a beacon of light. I think we're all beacons of light, and we should use our voice. Minnie, you are a great role model for this, an inspiration for this. We can all use our voices, and we don't hide your light under a basket. I do think I'm also thinking about our colleague Julie Silver, who has the saying, she be the light for others. She knows the way, and she will light it for others, right? There's a lot of darkness right now. So I appreciate that compliment. I'm going to take it. I needed that. So at Office of Women in Medicine and Science at Brown, which has been around for, probably close to 30 years, I took a role there, the leadership role there in 2016, and really started by trying to expand the kinds of programming that we offered. So I think that's one of the first things that I will share. And I know you do this in AWIS also, is like, we have book clubs, we have film nights, we have paint nights, we have we do raffles. We did a raffle for banned books for the Freedom to Learn Day on Wednesday by, Stop Silencing Women Authors, and had 100 entries of medical students who wanted to get a banned book. So a lot of awareness, a lot of community building. And I think the lesson for that is there's somebody that's never going to come to book club, but they're going to come to film night. There's somebody that's going to come to an in-person reception. That's a networking reception, but they're never going to come to book club because they don't have time to read, and that's not the part of their lives. We now, for offerings where we can, we really try to stagger our programming. So, sometimes it's the morning, sometimes it's lunchtime, sometimes it's after work, because not everybody can come. Speaking of film night, when Minnie, when you were talking about period equity, sorry, I muted myself. I'm going to share in the chat. There's a great film that if people haven't seen called Period End of Sentence, is a film about menstrual equity that we've screened here. So just as an example, the other thing I will say that in those early years of my tenure in this position, I really wanted to expand doing programs that people wanted done, right? So if people suggest a book, I say, great, let's do a book club on it. And let's see if we can tweet the author and see if they'll zoom in. So, we've had some really wonderful people join us for, virtually by the power of this virtual environment. So there's definitely a community building, networking, getting to know people. A lot of times people say, how do I find a mentor? And I think sometimes it's through shared experiences and about knowing each other. And, this is an old stereotype, but there's the golf course, right? And we're not going to meet on the golf course, but maybe we're going to meet, on going to a paint night together, or reception, or doing a community service activity together, or what have you. And those are how people who are going to find each other across campus, because at some point, sometimes we're in our own OR, or we're in our own clinic, and we're not, congregating with the other women. So there's a lot of that interpersonal stuff. And then, as I've been doing it longer, and probably, gained collaborators and accomplices and co-conspirators, right? We've started to try to tackle some more system-wide things. So, this is it's not, as Julie Silver used this example too, this is not a Super Bowl win, this is a first down, but we finally got some protected lactation pods in our hospital after 30 years. And we shouldn't be acting like that's a Super Bowl win. However, it's really exciting. It's still exciting to have a first down. And I will tell you that required collaboration among a dozen people who met about every other week for a year. The woman from HR who helped, because we eventually got the hospital to buy those pods, helped open one of the remote hospitals during the pandemic, and said that these pods was the hardest project he's ever worked on, because it's where are we going to put it? Aging, the aging infrastructure, the permission from the facility, all of these things. So, but trying to then sort of move that group of people that you've got to start to work together and identify as part of, helping each other. I then kind of deploying them to these different things that people want to work on, whether for some people it's making things better for parents and families. For other people, it's about standardizing hiring, recruiting, and retention practices, so that I'm sure we've all been on emails where you're like, oh my gosh, you cannot say that to somebody that you're going to try to recruit to this job, right? And so sort of getting those best practices to be kind of standardized and bringing people along. So, and now we're trying to expand into some more national things. So you mentioned the Well Project, and I thought I saw Dr. Hingle on the call before. Hi, Sue. So she and I had the pleasure of serving together. I know she is a beacon of light, just like you are via SIU. And we were on this Well collaborative team together. This is a wellness and equity and leadership training program that was virtual. It involved 50 women from across the nation in all different specialties and at both the assistant and associate professor level. So getting back to that bidirectional mentoring and like not being in love with our hierarchies and understanding that, you know, mid-career and late career folks can be getting as much from people who are junior as vice versa. So that group included women from 10 different specialty organizations across the country. And so it's really been even trying to take it to how do we take a national group and then take people's individual professional societies like AMWA and the American Academy of Pediatrics, who was the leader, who got the grant to fund this WELL program, and the ACP and the AMA and the American Psychiatric Association, and, you know, all these different leaders. So cross-disciplinary the cross-disciplinary discussion, I think, is another place where we'll get equity. And I'll stop there. But I think there's a ton of good work. And all right, one more thing. We did a Walls Do Talk thing here too. Like, I saw the wonderful pictures that you showed yesterday and what people have done, and that makes our environments make a difference. Seeing yourself in these places versus not is huge. So now I'll stop.
Well,
But thanks for asking that question.
yes, thank you both. You know, you're leading in so many spheres, you know, at the local, the national and global levels. And I just commend you and thank you for your leadership. In the last 2 minutes that we have, one piece of advice for women leaders from each of you. What's one piece of advice that you would give around the topic of inclusion? Minnie, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Vidya, and your team for organizing this. It was really an honor and a privilege. And thank you, Katie, not Nancy, even though I like that. You know, it was great, you know, and I hope we get a chance to work together beyond this. So what I just wanted to say, my 2 cents, 2 paisa worth, being Indian American, I think is for women leaders, be strong, be bold. Don't be ashamed of who you are. Just be yourself. You know, be respectful, but at the same time, don't let anybody browbeat you into doing something you don't want to. And inclusion, to answer your question more specifically, if you see somebody there, pull them along, make them a part of your team. By having somebody, it's not going to take away the limelight from you. It's not going to take away, you know, your place in the sun. We all have enough place. And we need to, and the biggest legacy we can leave behind is how we pass the torch effectively, practically, and elegantly and eloquently to our younger colleagues and peers. So don't be afraid of who you are. And you know what? The young people, you want to reach out to somebody, send them an email. If they don't get back, wait for like 3 days and send them again. But again, as women leaders, you lead, but you also make others realize their responsibility. It's not like the Pied Piper playing his flute and, you know, his pipe and having the mice following him, but make sure the path is clearly charted, and they need to meet you halfway. That is inclusion. It needs to be responsible. And thank you again so much.
Thank you, Minnie. Katie, how about you? One piece of advice.
Oh, you're going to give me the last word and ask me to say one thing? Not my strong suit. I love everything Minnie said about, and you know, I'm a big tent person. I definitely, something that helps me from avoiding kind of the burnout, and because this work is also hard, is trying to keep a sense of humor. And so I'm actually going to give a shout out. Oh, you can't probably see this is yellow. They're yellow. They're the yellow flags. So in addition to our pockets of our white coats that we're going to have a hammer and our stethoscope and now we need to have flag on the play. That Dr. Simpson mentioned, that she, you know, does the toss when she gets a bad, walks in on a bad comment, but the keep your sense of humor part of it, right? The remember the joy in medicine. Remember that 77% of women in healthcare, of healthcare workers, are women, and that if we can get over the trope that women don't like to help other women. We have them so outnumbered, and we should use our power. I know that was 11 things, not one. I'm sorry.
I love every one of them. Minnie, it's been an honor and such a privilege. This hour has been so inspiring. Much gratitude to you for sharing your perspectives and your wisdom today. And thank you again for your leadership. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Vidya. Bye, Katie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Truly
More
honored.
power to women. Bye.
Can't wait, and I can't wait to hear the next panel.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing from the
Thank
SIU
you.
students.
Yes. So speaking of, we're a little bit off schedule by a couple of minutes. I will say we'll take a 5-minute break. If everybody could come back, it's 10:07. If you could come back by 10:12, and we will hear from our SIU Medicine Marginalized Students Network. The future looks bright, those leaders. So please come back in 5 minutes and we'll get started then. Thank you.
Hey, Mina, I'm just making sure my lighting in my face is in the right spot. Do I look too close to the camera?
You look fine.
Okay, perfect.
Should I start sharing my screen, Jennifer?
Not until we're done with this slide.
Okay.
And we are live. You look lovely. I'm glad to see you all.
All right. Well, it's been 5 minutes since our break. We are going to go ahead and get started. I'm very, very excited about this next session. The SIU Medicine Marginalized Students Network. The future looks bright, and it certainly does, with this tremendous group of leaders right here with us at SIU. So I'm going to just briefly introduce each of our speakers, and we have a series of presentations from each group. So from the Asian Pacific American Medical Students Association, we have Meena Jain, Sanskriti Kurana, and Ashna Thakur, who are all third-year medical students. From the Latino Medical Student Association, we have Edgar George, also a medical student, and all of these are medical students at SIU School of Medicine. From the Student National Medical Association, we have Peaches Dozier, who's a rising fourth-year medical student, and Ted, you're going to have to help me pronounce your last name.
Agba Maple.
Agba Maple. Ted
You got it.
Agba Maple, yes, also a third-year medical student. From the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, we have Joseph Lezus, who is a fourth-year medical student. We also have Jordan Goodrich, a fourth-year medical student. And finally, our AMWA branch, American Medical Women's Association, we have Courtney Kemper, a third-year medical student, and Ashley Eggert, a third-year medical student. I hope I haven't missed anybody. I am so excited about this, so excited to hear about your great work. And without further ado, I'm going to have Jennifer or Laura bring up the first set of slides and have our first set of presenters start.
Ashna is going to share for us. Looks great, thank you.
Hi everyone, so I'm Meena and I'm one of the presidents and co-founders of our local SIU chapter of APAMSA along with Sanskriti and Ashna. So APAMSA, like kind of was already mentioned, stands for Asian Pacific American Medical Student Association, and it's a national organization that has chapters at medical schools all across the United States. And the mission of APAMSA is to promote the health and well-being of the AAN HPI community, or the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community. And so the specific goals of our local chapter, we have 3 goals. Our first goal is to build community within SIU School of Medicine. Our second goal is to do outreach to specifically the AAN HPI community within Springfield and the surrounding areas. And our third goal is to help educate our peers, kind of provide the opportunity for our peers to learn about these different cultures and ultimately help create a future healthcare workforce that understands how to care for AAN HPI patients in a culturally sensitive manner. And so this is kind of a little background of our club. This is our first year being an official club. The 3 of us kind of started by just hosting Holi celebrations, which is an Indian festival, back in our first year and our second year. And they were so well received by the SIU community that we kind of decided we wanted this to be a more permanent thing so that we could do more things, have more events, do more outreach. And it's worked out. We've had a really positive response. We really appreciate all the support that we've had from the community. And yeah, we're proud of what we've accomplished this year. So Sanskriti and Ashna will talk about specific events and specific initiatives that we've had this year to help create a more inclusive environment here at SIU. So now Sanskriti will talk about our cultural events.
Hi everyone. So we this past year have hosted several successful cultural events. We had a Diwali event that was in October, Lunar New Year in January, and then we just wrapped up our 3rd Holi event this last month. All of these events have had a variety of new food and new activities for students, residents, and faculty to experience and enjoy. And we have absolutely loved getting to share these important and joyous parts of our culture with those around us. This past year, also, some of our members were able to attend regional and national conferences for APAMSA, where they networked and also learned about some new initiatives to bring back to SIU. One of these initiatives is called the HAPPY program, which is a curriculum that's developed by APAMSA chapters around the country to provide access to medical cases that highlight AN-HPI patients specifically. We're working to bring this curriculum to the SIU community so that we can provide this opportunity to our own students to learn about some of these specific challenges and cultural differences within the AN-HPI community. And now Ashna is going to talk about some of our outreach initiatives that we've done.
Yeah, so 2 big projects that we worked on this year, one of which Sans and Mina started, which is the mental health talks at the temple, and they really took initiative with this, where they wrote the grant, organized different talks about mental health and stigma in the Asian American community, and then went to the temple and carried it out with different psych residents. And obviously, very important topic in the community that doesn't get discussed enough. And so very proud of them for starting that and carrying it through. Another project that we have started is doing different or reading different Asian American children's books at Enos. And our club members really like this. We work together with the Enos school district and their reading coordinator, and we fundraise to get different books. A lot of the people on this attending this have donated books, which is very, very nice. And we were able to go and kind of show kids some different Asian American cultural things that maybe they haven't seen before. A lot of them did know about things like Lunar New Year, and we're hoping to continue that. And we're also talking with some of the other cultural groups to start like monthly readings where we can go and read different cultural books to them and kind of get early exposure to different cultures. And so, I mean, looking at all these pictures, we've done a lot in our first year as a club. And I think that this has taught us a lot about being leaders. I think it's meaningful because it started off as just the 3 of us wanting to like embrace our culture and share it with our schoolmates. And it kind of turned into like a national thing. And I think that it's really cool that we assumed responsibility for starting it and then carrying out these projects. And we are very thankful to our club members who have done so much. Like we could not have put on any of this stuff if we didn't have their full support. And to the faculty at SIU for just being so welcoming, to Dr. Suh and Dr. Sundaresan, and of course, Dr. Prakash, for always putting us on our newsletter. So very thankful to all the great women leaders at SIU. And then now I'm gonna pass the mic to LMSA.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hector George. I am the former president of the Latino Medical Student Association, or LMSA for short. Just a little bit about who we are. We are a Latino-focused affinity group, but we're not exclusively for Latinx identifying folk. And we are members of a larger organization of other chapters around the country, and our parent organization is the NHMA, which is the National Hispanic Medical Association, which actually had their national conference this week up in Chicago. And so kind of a couple of things of what we do at LMSA here at SIU. Our big thing currently is our Healthy Heroes project. So this has become a labor of love for us. So this project specifically, we obtained a grant through SIU, and we are currently focusing on bringing health education and awareness to a community of Guatemalan immigrants in Edgewood Mobile Home Parks, which is actually not super far from the school. And our goal is to kind of help bring a lot of the education that kids might not otherwise have. So we want to focus on, healthy eating and, proper hygiene. These are communities composed of people that come from Guatemala, and not a lot of them are able to establish, healthcare. Parents come in here, they go to work almost immediately. It's a community of, kids looking after kids, and we want to make sure they have the right education when it comes to their health. So we haven't kickstarted off yet. We are just on the brink of it. We have met with community leaders established a secure location for us to kind of have whatever it is that we need. We have a curriculum in place. Now we're just waiting on a start date. So that should be kicking off soon in the next couple months here. Another big thing for us is the Spanish Medical Series that we have been doing through the year, which is where myself, along with a couple other of our members that are native Spanish speakers, kind of come together and we teach medically relevant Spanish for SIU students. I know that is something that people have been interested in. We've had good turnouts throughout our sessions here. And last, we kind of focus on educational and awareness of the Latino, Hispanic community and culture as well, especially during Hispanic Heritage Month that runs through mid-September through mid-October. We kind of send out little newsletters talking about, the lesser known important Hispanic people that are out there, especially in the medical world, even having, little displays in the library kind of educating people about what Hispanic culture really means. And of course, our big Hispanic Heritage Month kickoff has always been a little catered food event, which people seem to always enjoy. And lastly, we also go to conferences. So the last one that we attended was the Midwest Regional Conference in Michigan State University up in Grand Rapids. And it was a really, really great experience, kind of be able to connect with other Latino Hispanic students out there as well. We have a national conference in Georgia coming up in September, which we are also looking forward to going into. Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Ted. I'm a third-year medical student at SIU. I just want to talk about SNMA and the things we've been doing in the community. So SNMA is an African-American student group founded in 1964 to serve the needs of students of color in medical school. We have over 150 medical chapters serving over 6,000 students. And we recently had our national conference in Hartford, Connecticut. We had the chance to meet with other students, network, and find ways to grow into our profession. So some photos that are being shown right now are some of our community events. One of the events that I'm really proud to take part in is something called Depots, which stands for Delivering Equity to Places Outside of Traditional Settings. What we do is go to local churches, community centers, other places where the public gathers, and provide diabetic screenings, blood pressure screenings, health talks, BMIs, and other primary care needs, and improve the health literacy of our community. And these are specifically places that the African-American community can reach out to. So we're helping bridge gaps and try to address those healthcare disparities. So that's one of the initiatives I really take pride in, and it's been really rewarding to reach out to the community and make a difference.
Okay, my name is Peaches Dozier. I'm also the co-chair of SNMA here at SIU. We are the Region 2 chapter. Another initiative that we had to make SIU a more inclusive environment is the idea of specialty talk dinners. So we applied for a CHOP grant and we were granted funds to be able to fund this initiative. And this initiative was basically brought up because we were looking for a conduit for underrepresented and minority students to find a way to find their voice in a professional setting. And just find a way to gain exposure and mentorship into whatever field they were interested in. We figured that this would be a good way to increase student participation, given COVID, virtual meetings, and just limited specialty interest overall, or not having like a clear understanding of what certain specialties are early on. So these specialty talks, we invited various program directors, chairs, presidents, or faculty from different specialties to have dinner with us. And we just basically created a space for students to be able to build these professional relationships with these senior physicians, also expand their knowledge in the field, basically find ways for those students to join those specialties and be able to contribute to advancing health equity in that field. Also, just increasing the opportunities for leadership and building professional development and gaining mentorship is something that we were able to do with that. So far, we've been able to host 5 of those, and we plan to continue this next year as well. We do attend the regional and national conferences. The regional conference this year was held at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, in Rochester, Minnesota. It gave students a chance to showcase their research, network with other institutions, and find out how their institutions are, having inclusive environments and being able to bounce ideas off of them, and just generate new initiatives for their schools. Also, the national conference this year was in Hartford, Connecticut. One of our own faculty, Dr. John Flack, he's a really big contributor and donor to the AMEC, and we were able to send for the first time 12 students to this national conference, and with fully funded arrangements and transportation. They were also able to showcase their research, meet program directors and chairs to be able to apply to these residency programs. They were also able to run for national positions where they're able to carry out the work of SNMA on a national level. Our very own Stella Mudeka, she actually became the national treasurer. So that's something we have to be proud of. So she will be carrying out our mission on a national level. We also have the opportunities to host panels for different specialties that we lack representation. I actually got to host a national panel for plastic surgery at this conference with various plastic surgeons around the country to gauge interest and just kind of give early exposure to those students, because we also have high school students attending these conferences as well. So overall, we get the chance to just really advance our leadership being in this. And then also the other, I guess we didn't really mention this, but we also have different fundraising events where we, include everyone in the school to be able to attend. Where we had one at Sky Zone, we had different events for Black History Month, a slew of events. Kenesha Green and Denzel actually got a chance to organize, and they basically led a full month of events just to recognize Black History Month, and included all of the SIU community to be able to participate in. So just in a few of our pictures, we had our movie nights. Here we had a paint night. We also had a night at the what is that called? It's the little bounce place. Sky Zone. There we go. We also had a gun violence talk at the Fresh Visions. We do other things at the other churches around. We participate with the NAACP, doing student back to school screenings and health fairs for the students in the community who are unable to get in to see their primary care doctors. So there's just so many things that we're doing in the community and at SIU to make it an inclusive environment. And we really want to just thank everybody for their participation and support, and all of our allies on these initiatives. And next, I'll go ahead and introduce Joseph Lises and Jordan Goodrich, going to be talking to us about GLMA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jordan, one of the outgoing co-presidents of GLMA. We have a chapter at SIU, but it's a national organization. And we kind of have 4 goals. I'll talk about 2 of them, and I'll let Joey talk about the other 2. One of our biggest ones is kind of what you see in these pictures here, is our community outreach. And the big event that we do for that is we always have a booth, and we march in the Springfield Pride Fest. And why this is important is just because so many people come from far and wide of central and southern Illinois, and this is their closest Pride Fest that they have, especially in these rural communities. And when they come, we find it important that we are representing SIU there, so they know that it is a safe place to go to, especially with our gender equity clinic that we have here. And so we educate on that. We also educate on some other things. In that bottom left picture, you see blood pressure screenings that we were doing. So that's kind of one of our big ones, is just community outreach and making sure that people recognize that SIU is with them. A lot of people really appreciate kind of just seeing SIU at Pride Fest, more than they care about their blood pressure screening or anything like that. They just like to see the representation there. And then the second big one that I'm going to talk about is kind of just education. As other people have talked about, we also attend and present at conferences, which is good for educating, people at a national level. But we also make sure to educate people just within our own four walls of SIU also. So we host journal clubs, and we also have done some educational reform. This past year, we just opened up a new position on our executive board that includes the first year medical students at SIU. They're typically a little bit separated because they're down in Carbondale for their first year. So we made sure that we also had an executive board member down there so they could be included. And then I'll let Joey talk about the other two big things that we do.
Another big goal of ours was kind of research, and we've bulked up this goal within the past couple years thanks to the help of Dr. Wiley Jenkins over in the Population Studies and Policy Department. We were able to partner with him and have several students work with his team to kind of even develop their own research projects, looking specifically at Southern and Central Illinois and looking at problems that maybe the LGBTQ have disproportionately compared to maybe their heterosexual neighbors. We looked at everything from cancer screening practices to opioid drug use to things like home security and food security. So that's been growing very rapidly. We also love to have him come and talk and give us updates on his research kind of throughout the years, as another way to provide education kind of throughout medical school. Like Jordan mentioned, we've also been lucky and been able to send people to national conferences. The Building the Next Generation of Academic Physicians just happened this last month, and we were able to send 2 people there to present their own research on the education reform they've been a part of at SIU, but also to kind of network and learn other strategies in tackling this. And then lastly, one of our goals is to kind of hold these social events. One, to kind of just build a community within SIU. And we do things from like pizza parties to watching TV or movies together, or more academic things like journal clubs and things like that. Yeah, and that's kind of what we do.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Eggert, a third-year med student.
And I'm Courtney Kemper, a third-year medical student as well. We're representing the American Medical Women's Association at SIU. So our mission, Ashley, next slide. Our mission with AMWA is to, of course, advance women in medicine, advocate for equity, and ensure excellence in healthcare. At SIU, we do this in many ways, including through our community involvement, mentoring, networking, and professional development. Next slide, please. Some of the ways that we're doing this is volunteering at the biannual Girls on the Run 5K. We also have several AMWA members that are coaches for this organization as well. One area that we've hit pretty heavily on is working with the Nurse Family Partnership of Sangamon County. In this, we're working with the families that are involved in this program in order to provide the educational opportunities for them. And this could be anything ranging from home safety for whenever a baby comes home and is growing up, car seat safety to make sure they're safe, on their rides to and from appointments, of course, and nutrition talks as well. One other area, we've recently partnered with the Alliance for Women in Medicine and Science at SIU. We're working to provide care baskets for new parents in the area. And our goal with this is to help battle food and resource insecurity. So right now we're working on raising money in order to provide those baskets to individuals in the community. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ashley so that she can talk about some of the social events we've participated in as well.
So throughout the year, we have various events, starting from the picture on the left. We have a kickoff event at Sheedy Shores. This just gives second-year students who have just recently moved up to Springfield to kind of get to know upperclassmen, potentially other faculty members that also might want to attend, a good networking event. The next picture is the Girls on the Run 5K, which Courtney kind of touched on. The mission of Girls on the Run is just to provide girls of all ages to recognize and encourage them to kind of utilize their strengths in different areas and build connections and work well together as a team. And we volunteer at water stations, the Happy Hair Station, which everybody seems to love. You can put glitter and spray paint like little girls' hairs, and they just get to be a rock star for a day, so they love it. The pumpkin patch is the next picture. Again, it's kind of just a fun, steady break that allows students to network with upperclassmen and potentially underclassmen in their chosen specialty, just to get those mentor-mentee relationships, be able to get advice and give advice as well. And the last picture is the cookie exchange that we had this year for the first time. I loved it. We came together right before Christmas break and we all made a sweet little treat, and we got to drink hot chocolate, watch holiday movies, and just kind of be around each other, take a break from studying. It's a very stressful time for people, so it was a good reprieve. And all of these really kind of allow us to cultivate relationships with each other and faculty members that are involved with AMWA. Yes. And then we also just wanted to give a quick shout out to Dr. Hingle and Dr. Prakash. AMWA at SIU really benefits from the incredible leadership and female role models that we have here, and we just feel very proud that 2 of our faculty members were selected to be on the National AMWA Board of Directors. So Dr. Prakash serves as the chair of AMWA membership and is the chair of the Rural Health for AMWA's Program of Diversity and Inclusion. And Dr. Hingle is the 2023-2024 president-elect, and she was also recognized this past September as for the AMWA Inspire Award. So we just feel very lucky that we have these amazing role models to help us kind of pave our way in the field of medicine.
Can I just say, wow. And I don't think that captures what I'm feeling right now. I am so overwhelmed by your level of impact, both within SIU and in our community. And I think from a healthcare perspective, your work, especially in the community, you're cultivating trust with our patients, which is lacking. And there's such an opportunity for that. And you're building trust and making those connections is directly impacting patient care. And I can't thank you enough for your leadership and your tremendous work in each of your organizations. You'll see in the chat, Dr. Sundaration wrote, very proud of this group, all the excellent work you've done. Dr. Wendy Alameen wrote, I'm so proud of all our students and the affinity groups. You all have had a profound impact. And I keep coming back to that. It's your impact. It's immeasurable. And so my heartfelt gratitude to you. My heart is just swelling with pride to be connected to this in any way. So thank you. I encourage our participants to please use the chat for further comments and questions. I guess I have a general question for you. We're talking about cultivating inclusive environments as an organization. And I think from the perspective of a faculty, right, for a brand new medical student coming in, how do we make this environment more inclusive for you? What's on your wish list? How does that look?
So you mean like as a new medical student looking for affinity groups, how do those groups become more inclusive?
Well, I would say as a new medical student coming to SIU, when you come to SIU and as you go through your 4 years of medical school, and hopefully choose to stay here, or go train somewhere else and come back, how do we create an environment where you come here and you feel like I belong here? I know I will thrive here because I'm valued, and I know that that I'm wanted and I'm needed, and that I will be valued, and you have a sense of belonging here. What can we do to cultivate that?
Well, I guess I
think
can
that's
comment on
go
this.
ahead, Peaches.
Oh, sure. I feel like, when we come in, we do have an event where all of the organizations are kind of presented to us, what's available at the school, and Hope Cherry runs this. And then there also is a section, if you maybe don't see something that you necessarily want to be a part of, but you have an idea and you have, and it's burning in you and you really want to get it out there, you want to get people involved, there's still opportunity for that. You can create your own interest group. There's a lot of support for people who want to create their own interest groups. I think we have so many interest groups now that, weren't existing before. And I feel like a lot of things we have to understand is like, even though there are people who don't necessarily look like us, what's most important is that they share the mission, and I think that's what's really important. And SNM, like for example, SNMA, I remember people were asking, well, am I allowed to join if I'm not Black? I'm like, of course you can join SNMA if you're not, you don't have to be African American to join SNMA. You can be Asian American, you could be Caucasian, you could be Latino, doesn't matter. You can be any of those things, Pacific Islander, it doesn't matter. You can join. It's just, sharing the mission, and we kind of work parallel with a lot of the groups, and collaborate on different events and initiatives as well. So I feel like coming in as a medical student, I would automatically feel included, and I would feel like I belong here just because there's so many options available, and there's such a a positive response. If I have an initiative or an idea and I want it to move forward, there is that support there for it to happen.
Thank you, Peaches.
Mhm.
Edgar, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think a lot of it also comes with increasing overall recruitment of minority students coming from an LMSA specific standpoint. Our chapter is fairly small. I think my particular class only has 3. The class after us probably has a handful too. And we saw this kind of at the regional conference that we attended to. SIU was one of the smaller chapters, there. We were hearing of other chapters that we have, 20, 30, 40 members. And I think a lot of that comes in from increasing recruitment even before they even come to medical school. And it's not to say that just because you don't fit a particular criteria, you cannot join these affinity groups, so people do feel more comfortable when they are around their own.
Ashna.
Yeah, to kind of add to that, I think when I was first applying to SIU, I was a little nervous because I feel like the demographic of minority students, I don't know, it's something about like Southern Illinois. It makes me like worry a little bit. I'm like, I hope there's enough diversity, enough. But I think when I first got to Carbondale, and the faculty that spoke on our first orientation day were just so like outrightly positive towards minority, and just like basically had like a no tolerance policy towards racism, sexism, any of the isms. And I think just having that like the people in power supporting that mission very like outrightly was really helpful. And I also think like for example, when we first started this club, we talked to Dr. Elamine. I think the DEI office was she basically told us that we should be able to take up space, and not feel uncomfortable about doing that. So I think her also being on our side, the whole DEI office, and all the other faculty was really important. So I think that helped a lot to make me feel comfortable here.
Thank you so much. There's another question from Dr. Hingle. How did the groups work together to advance, achieve mutual goals? The concept of collaboration is at the forefront of her mind, and she believes there's incredible potential with group collaboration. So have you thought about collaborative opportunities? Are there examples of collaboration?
Yeah, so the Marginalized Student Network was actually born out of that idea because, with the word marginalized, we're minority groups. So as Edgar was talking about, there's a few in each of our groups, and we realized, well, there's strength in numbers. So that's why we created the Marginalized Student Network. We took all of these smaller marginalized student groups, put them together and kind of put them under an umbrella term. This was actually born out of what happened with George Floyd a couple of years ago. And we realized, we need to come together, have these strengths in numbers. If there's anything that we want to get done or need to get done in the future, I think we all thought it would be smart to make sure that we were all kind of networked within each other instead of being separated small groups. And that way we could all support each other and have a bigger voice.
I love that. I think that's powerful, Jordan. And I think that really speaks to the power of you collectively, right? As one big group, as the Marginalized Students Network. How many medical students have something like this? I can't think of very many. So, there's real power to that. I do want to ask each of you, if you wouldn't mind. Each of you stands out as an inspiring, courageous, and strong leader. I guess my question for you is, I asked this of our last panelist, and I would like to ask you as well. What's one piece of advice you would give to a budding student leader who wants to be just like you and wants to lead in some way? And so I would like to go around the virtual room. Peaches, I'm going to start with you. And I know that's hard because I just asked. But what's one piece of advice?
Okay. Well, I would just preface this by saying we just had our student elections for SNMA, and there were a few people who came to me and told me they're interested in wanting to be, run for one of the e-board positions. And my advice to them, I said, well, first of all, just know that you can do it. It's a lot of responsibility that comes with SNMA. I think because of the amount of time it's been around, and kind of the expectation that it has for the leaders at the different institutions. So just be bold, have an open mind, and be willing to work with others. Like, don't try to do it all by yourself. Don't do it by yourself at all. Okay, you need the people on your team to be with you. You need to be able to collaborate and have an open mind with others to be able to achieve this mission. It cannot be done as a solo. It's not a solo thing. It's a team sport. So I think that's my thing, be bold, be a team player, and keep an open mind. That's what I would say.
I love it. Thank you, Peaches. Sanskriti, how about you?
My answer is pretty similar to Peaches. Me, Ashna, and Mina, we started this first year with the Holy event. And I think if it wasn't for us working in a group, it would be pretty hard to kind of, to be where we are at today. We've accomplished so much by working together. And we have each other to lean on and for support. And it just makes this whole thing a lot more fun as well. So I think my advice would be to, find a team, find a group of people that you enjoy working with, and then you can go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme here. Power of the team. I love it. Ted.
I'd say just don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone and just be yourself. There's ways that you can serve and make a difference in your community. Everybody's called with their own unique gifts to make a certain change, and just be yourself and do what you think will make a difference, and you'd be surprised at how far it can go. So
thank you so much. Mina.
I guess, so kind of going off Ted's, I would say let like nervousness and fear drive you rather than hold you back, because there's nothing easy about being a leader, and it's really scary. And I know I was very nervous with starting this group, like, will we be accepted? Will there be a response? It's very kind of scary and nerve-wracking, but try to let that drive you rather than hold you back.
Thank you. Courtney.
Sort of echoing what others have said, I would say if you have an idea, don't be afraid to reach out for support. I know I had an idea and I reached out to Dr. Prakash and others at the institution, and I received, a ton of support around the idea that we had for AMWA and what we wanted to do to further our outreach. So don't be afraid to ask for support.
Thank you, Courtney. Joseph.
I was also going to say, don't be afraid to reach out to faculty because there are opportunities out there. If you have the idea, somebody knows how to get it done. And I don't think a medical student often knows how to get these things done. But also reach out to the community. People are usually very receptive more often than not.
And I find it reassuring, knowing that you have this feeling that you can approach faculty, that they're there as a resource, and that they're here to help you. So I find that very reassuring, and I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. Jordan.
I would say get in early while you still have a mentor. A lot of times it can happen with these, even like these student groups where fourth year leaves, then a third year comes in as president, and may not have a transition period. I know most of us, I think, have that little transition period for sure. And so just be ready to do that. If you're a third year medical student, like we have a ton here, get in those leadership positions. And then you have mentorship from upperclassmen who have been doing this for however long, and you can kind of learn from them before you're the fourth year and you're the most senior in the team.
Thank you, Jordan. Edgar.
I would say that if you build it, they will come. So a lot of times I know the groups are looking to expand their membership, and this can come from like inviting other people outside from the affinity group to events. So one of the ones that LMSA did, we had a Latin dance night, and we kind of got a pretty good response. We were teaching people how to dance some like basic Latin music, and it's doing little things like that. Hey, we're opening this up to everyone, and if we can get from this experience 2 people, 3 people to join, next time another 2 or 3, that's where you're going to be able to grow the organization.
Thank you, Edgar. Ashley.
I would say find faculty members that are very passionate about the cause and the mission that you have. A lot of times, at least from my experience, faculty members have a lot of ideas. They just need kind of people to help bring them to fruition. And they might know the avenues and the people to talk to for these things to happen, but they just might not have the time. So I think finding a really good mentor is a huge asset. And I think it's easy, at least for me, to recognize areas in which I'm strong, but I tend to ignore my weaknesses. But I think when I look at my weaknesses and then I'm able to identify them and ask others for help who might be stronger in that area, things get done, and they get done better. So I think really taking time to reflect on yourself as well is huge.
Thank you, Ashley. Ashna.
I think from just a leadership perspective, the hardest thing for me has been taking just full responsibility over something and like making sure that it's carried out and seen through. And it's definitely good to like get feedback. I'll always ask like, do you guys prefer this or this? But at the end of the day, it's your project and you have to make the final call, which is really nerve-wracking. But I think, yeah, making sure you see something through to the end is one of the most important things.
Well, I want to thank you so much again for your leadership. I remain inspired. I have learned so much from each of you. I loved hearing about your work. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your leadership, both at SIU and again in the community. And thank you for spending some time with us and sharing all of your great work. Much gratitude. This was the perfect way to end this virtual conference, really. I just feel so empowered and uplifted by all of your great work. So many, many thanks. We do have, for those of you who registered at 11:30, an in-person networking session at the Springfield Art Association, which includes lunch. I'm going ahead and putting that address in the chat. So for those of you who did register, please join us for a nice meal, and we're going to be working on an art project together. And Jennifer Coyle asked me to remind you that you are going to be getting an email with evaluations and instructions for CME. Can we do a quick raffle? Jennifer and Laura. So we're going to pick two people from the list. And again, I'm going to share my screen. Whoever wins the raffle, you have the choice of these 4 books, 2 from Sudha Murthy, 1 from Karen Nichols on physician leadership, and a Women on the Walls book. And the books by Sudha Murthy are 3,000 Stitches and Here, There, and Everywhere. So our first raffle winner.
Karen Reynolds.
Karen Reynolds, congratulations. If you could send Jennifer Coyle or Laura Worrell a private message on which book you would like and your address, we will send that to you. And who's the next winner?
Laura, were you wanting to do one?
Sure. Tyra Jones.
Tyra Jones, many congratulations. So again, if both of you could privately message Laura or Jen with your preferred book and your address, we will get that to you. So congratulations to our raffle winners. Well, I want to end with gratitude to every one of you who was able to join us over the past 2 days. It's been an incredible journey from planning it with my dream team, the conference planning committee, to hearing the stories and hearing the collective wisdom from all of our speakers. I'm grateful to each of our speakers. I'm grateful to our conference planning committee, and especially to every one of our participants who took time out of their schedules to join us over the last couple of days. And I will end with a quote. This is an interesting one by Albert Einstein. And he said, "Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." So I had to think about that a little bit and really think about how it applies to inclusion. And I really think of it this way. When you pair a lack of diverse talent with a lack of inclusion, you will not have progress. It's stifling and there's no path forward. So I guess what I take from that is that we need to look closely at our fish, our people, and recognize and honor the diverse array of talents that they bring to any team, and really do your part, especially in leadership, to cultivate those talents and make our fish, make our people feel appreciated and really make them feel like they belong. So I will end there. And again, I thank each and every one of you. Please move forward, take the pearls that you glean from this conference, do your part to build inclusive environments, honor your people, and thank you so much again. I look forward to connecting with those of you who signed up to be at the Springfield Art Association. Many thanks again. Have a great day and a great weekend.